Dr. Brown, can you state your full name for the record?
Yes, I'm Dr. Verena Brown.
And how are you currently employed?
I am a child abuse pediatrician at the Stephanie V. Blank Center with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta.
How long have you worked for that particular center?
9 years.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury your formal education before we get into your specialist training?
Yes, so I went to Georgia Institute of Technology, where I got my bachelor's degree in biology. I went to Mercer University School of Medicine, where I got my MD. I went to the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where I get my pediatrics training, and then I went to Eastern Virginia Medical School for my child abuse training.
In addition to the regular training to be an MD, how many additional years do you spend specifically working on child abuse trainings?
So after you get your MD, so that's a 4-year degree, you have to do a pediatrics residency. That's where UAB was. And after you finish that, you have to do 3 more years of a child abuse fellowship, and that's where I did in Virginia.
So in addition to your 4-year bachelor's, how many years of formal education did you have then?
So in addition to my bachelor's degree, so we have 4 years of medical school, 3 years of residency, 3 years of fellowship. That is a total of 10 years.
Are you certified to practice medicine?
Yes.
What certifications do you hold?
I am certified in general pediatrics and child abuse pediatrics.
Are you licensed to practice medicine in any state?
Yes, here in Georgia.
And are you a professional of any professional organizations? Are you a member of any professional organizations in your field?
Yes, I am a member of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Actually, I'm an elected member of the Council of Child Abuse and Neglect. That's a council that's part of the American Academy of Pediatrics, where we help write policy for the United States, and it's actually regarded internationally as well for the field of child abuse pediatrics. And I'm also a member of the International Society for Child Abuse and Neglect, member of the Helfer Society, which is a professional society for child abuse and neglect. Professional membership also for various other things, but those are the ones for child abuse and neglect.
Do you subscribe to any professional journals?
Yes, the AAP's Journal of Pediatrics is the main one.
Approximately how many patients have you treated during your career?
Many. It's been in the thousands now.
Okay. Have you testified as an expert before?
Yes, I've testified for both the prosecution and for the defense, so for both sides. And I've run out of count, actually. It's been about 200 times, I think.
Your Honor, at this point in time, the state would tender Dr. Verena Brown as an expert as a child abuse specialist.
Mr. Hood.
Well, I have no objection to her being admitted as a child abuse pediatrician. I don't know about the word specialist.
Okay. So no objection to her testifying as an expert in the field of child abuse pediatrics. Is that correct, Mr. Hood? Ms. Bernard.
Not to be difficult, I think we have no objection to her testifying as to being a pediatrician or in pediatrics, but child abuse pediatrics, that is the name of a crime. That is not a medical area, that is not a scientific area of specialty. And in fact, in her reviewing her CV, she talks about writing policies specifically. This is not scientific. This is a legal conclusion that the jury is responsible for coming to. So she certainly seems qualified as an expert in pediatric medicine, and we have no objection to that. But characterizing her as anything that has to do with the actual allegations the state is seeking to make goes beyond the Daubert standard of scientific evidence.
Ms. Fox.
Your Honor, she is a child abuse specialist. Her specialty is child abuse pediatrics, as Mr. Hood pointed out. I would tender her as an expert in that field. She has testified for me as an expert in that field before. The state would submit she's qualified. If they want to attack her underpinnings and voir dire a little bit more on that, I am tendering her for what she is.
Okay. I would say this. I will admit her for the purposes of testifying as an expert in the field of pediatrics with I think there's at least a foundation that has been presented, and I'll certainly allow the defense counsel, if they wish to voir dire her, as to any specialized training she might have in the field of child abuse. So, Mr. Hood, would you like to ask any questions that, or Ms. Bernard, any questions as to that? Or you just want to wait and do it on cross?
I mean, I suppose if there is any additional information regarding her curriculum vitae or experience that was not previously elicited by the state, we would be interested if there is any additional training in this as a specific scientific field. But again, this is a legal question before the jury, and so of course a scientific expert can offer that, but she cannot make any legal conclusions, and we would argue that that characterization improperly absorbs the function of the jury.
And I understand that objection, and I concur with that objection, actually. I mean, she's a expert in the field of pediatrics, and she may have specialized training in the area of child abuse. I guess it's the nomenclature of child abuse pediatrician that I think the defense is objecting to.
Yes, Your
So
Honor.
I'll accept her as an expert in the field of pediatrics. She may have specialized training. I'm sure you're going to ask about that. I'm sure the defense is going to ask about that in the area of child abuse, but I'm not going to call her an expert child abuse pediatrician.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. I'm going to go back to your training at the Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters in Norfolk, Virginia. It's my understanding you just testified that you had 3 additional years of child abuse training at that facility.
Yes, so child abuse pediatrics is a field, a subspecialty of pediatrics that is certified, a board certification under the American Board of Pediatrics. You have to take a 3-year training program. You have to sit for a board specification, a test, in order to be able to practice for it. You have to have continuing education credits. It's on a 5-year cycle in order to continuing to practice child abuse pediatrics. And it's a very formalized program. And right now, not only did I take the program myself, but we also have fellowships at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta where we train people to become child abuse pediatricians in a formalized curriculum. And in addition to teaching fellows, I also run the National Fellowship Didactic Program that teaches child abuse pediatricians throughout the country. It's the only national program of its type, so that we can go through the board specifications in lecture format to help people pass the exam.
And you indicated that you are certified as a child abuse specialist, that actually sat for the board and got the certificate in that field.
Yes.
Your Honor, again, I would tender her as an expert as a child abuse pediatrics.
Ms. Bernard, Mr. Hood, do you wish to voir dire the witness?
We don't have any additional voir dire, Your Honor, but we do maintain that it has not met the Daubert standard for individualized, scientifically reliable testimony in this particular area.
Okay.
And would review our previous objections regarding the improper nature, the improper prejudicial nature of such a characterization to the jury who is charged with finding whether or not such a thing occurred.
Okay. I'm going to ask, if the ladies and gentlemen of the jury will step to the jury room for just a moment, please. Okay. Ms. Bernard, what's your objection? And I understand, and I guess let me be sure I'm understanding, for Ms. Fox is offering this witness as an expert in the field of, and the name of the field she has stated is child abuse pediatrics. Is your objection that that's not a recognized field of pediatrics? Is your objection that child abuse is a legal term and therefore, and I understand that's the ultimate issue, we call it cruelty to children in Georgia, but I understand that's the ultimate issue for the jury. What specifically is your objection?
To both of those, Your Honor, of course, there is a standard for the presentation of scientific evidence by someone who is qualified as an expert, and here particularly the mention of the specific policy-making role of her work in this child abuse subfield of pediatrics we believe is frankly disqualifying for someone to operate under the scientific standard of Daubert. This could be an entire hearing unto itself, really, as to this field of child abuse pediatrics and the previous cases that this witness has been involved in regarding the veracity of her testimony. And so our objection at this point is that there has not been a sufficient foundation laid that this is reliable, a scientific separate field that is so specifically separate from pediatrics as to warrant a new and separate qualification to be provided to the jury. And it does feed into our objection that in this specific case, unlike if it were a situation where, I don't know, pediatrics from children playing games or something like that, that would also probably be a Daubert objection. But here is the very name of the characterization is not only unscientific, but goes to the ultimate issue that the jury is being asked to determine in this case.
Mr. Hood?
I join in that objection. I think it's akin to me the practice that was attempted to be developed years ago in our circuit where in child abuse cases, kids would go to the witness stand and they would walk a therapy dog into the courtroom. It sort of assumes what we're here to prove and what the jury's here to decide. Problem with that nomenclature. She's a pediatrician. We've got a pediatrician that's going to testify in our case, who's been a pediatrician for 4 decades, who says, well, I don't have that certificate. Does that mean I can't come to the court and testify about whether or not I think a child has been abused? She's a pediatrician. She's an expert in pediatrics. It is what it is.
Ms. Fox?
Your Honor, number one, I would say if they had a Daubert motion, it should have been filed in writing long before today. That is something that requires a separate hearing outside the presence of the jury. That is something that both sides bring in the experts in the case law and the professional journals to the court to make a decision. What I will say is she is a treating physician of Jameson. She is the child abuse specialist, that is her title, that evaluated Jameson at CHOA in January and then again in June. In addition to that, both sides have already mentioned to the jury that there would be child abuse specialists testifying. In fact, at some point, someone has said in the presence of the jury there would be 3. I don't know whether there'll be 3 or not. The state's clearly calling at least 1 right now. That said, she has put on the record the extensive training and the fact that it is a certified profession. This is not something where we just made up a title and brought her, trounced her on into court. This is something that there is a program, that there is a certification. She holds the certification. She has sat on that board. She has taken the test. She has also been in a board that trains other people. So it's not even something where she's a unique creature unto herself and there's no other ones in the United States. We know already the jury has heard there is a child abuse specialist at Erlanger. We have heard that specialist's name. We know that the child was seen by a child abuse specialist in CHOA. That has already been told to the jury. I have brought that child abuse specialist in front of the jury, and my expectation will be to go into mechanism. I was objected to on politics and because she's a radiologist. This witness is the child abuse specialist. I am allowed to go into mechanisms. Quite frankly, she's testified before you before in that capacity. She is my expert from a murder case that I tried when Samir Patel and Jennifer Block and Emma Lovell were on the other side. And she was my child abuse pediatric specialist that we tendered as that specialist and has already testified in front of you. So to be giving a Daubert motion in the middle of a multi-day trial with no written notice, to say all of a sudden we're going to question that as a field when it's something that you get board certified in and she holds that certificate. It's not like I asked that of our pediatrician who does not hold the certificate. This is the person who's certified to do this. Quite frankly, I object to the timing of the motion and I object to the quality of the motion. This is an established field that you get board certified in and this witness has that certification.
Okay. We're going to take a 5-minute recess. Okay, let me say this, and I would note that there wasn't a Daubert motion filed prior to the trial of this case. I would also note, in response to arguments as well, whether or not this witness has testified before this court in other cases, I would put that aside in that different attorneys were there. Perhaps no objection was made at that time. I don't remember all the trials we've had over the years. So I can only take the objections as they come before this court today or during the course of this trial. This is what I would say. I understand, I think, based upon the limited testimony that's been presented here today, that this witness has had extra training in the form of a fellowship in the area, in the concentration of child abuse and child abuse protocols or child abuse diagnoses. Now, for purposes of this trial, this court's ruling would be that the court would accept this witness as an expert in the field of pediatrics with specialized training in the area of child abuse. But I don't like the nomenclature of a child abuse pediatrician, and I understand the objection that's been presented to that nomenclature. Now, she's a pediatrician with training in the area of child abuse, but I just don't like the nomenclature, child abuse pediatrician, so.
And I understand what the court is saying, but Delbert is saying it's not a field law. Delbert's saying it's fringe medicine. This is not.
Well, I said they didn't file a motion. That's what I'm saying. I'm not treating this as a Daubert hearing. There's no motion, there's no Daubert motion pending, but there's a motion pending about the qualifying this witness as a child abuse pediatrician. And so what I'm saying is I would qualify this, we didn't qualify those previous witnesses today. We didn't qualify them as a child abuse radiologist. We qualified them as radiologists who have had experience, they were qualified as a radiologist, or perhaps they were a pediatric radiologist. And then they testified about whether or not they had interpreted opinions in cases involving child abuse. But we didn't call them a child abuse radiologist. So I do understand the objection when the ultimate issue before the court is, and perhaps that's a philosophical debate that the legal system and the medical world could have one day about the nomenclature they're using for these areas. But I understand the objection when the ultimate issue for the jury to decide is whether or not the offense of, in Georgia, it's not called child abuse, it's called cruelty to children, whether the offense of cruelty to children occurred. I think it would be appropriate, I'm granting the objection, to that nomenclature, child abuse pediatrician.
Understanding that's your ruling, am I still going to be allowed to ask the questions hypothetically about child abuse?
Yes. Yes, you are, but I'm not going to call her an expert in the field of child abuse pediatrics. It's going to be, she's an expert in the field of pediatrics with specialized training in the area of child abuse.
Thank you, Your Honor.
It's just, it's semantics here, but I think it's important semantics.
Write it down so I can move forward again in front of the jury. You're going to qualify her as an expert in pediatrics with specialized
Training in the field of child abuse. And I'm talking in the microphones, which I just told y'all not to do, but, so. And again, I'm not treating that as a Daubert motion. I'm treating that as an objection that was raised here in court. Okay, let's have the ladies and gentlemen of the jury step back in the courtroom. The court would find that this witness is qualified as in the field of pediatrics with specialized training in the area of child abuse. Ms. Fox, go ahead with your questions.
Dr. Brown, during January of 2022, did you have an occasion to see Jamison Timms?
I did.
Would that be in the time frame of January the 14th of 2022?
It was.
What did you do to prepare for your evaluation of Jamison Timms?
So whenever a child comes to us, there's a couple of different ways that they can come to us. Either they come through the emergency room or through a pediatrician on the floor of the hospital that has concerns. And typically there's concerns for either physical abuse, sexual abuse, or neglect. And the job of our team is to really look at a case.
I would object, this is non-responsive. The question was how she came to know Jamison Timms and how he was admitted, and we're going into something about multiple other
I'll sustain that objection. You can, if you'll redirect your
My
witness, Ms.
question is,
Fox.
what did you do to prepare for this specific evaluation?
Sure. So I had received a call from Dr. Carla Garcia at Erlanger about Jameson Timms. She had stated to
You
me...
can't say what she stated, but what did you do?
Okay. There were concerns for abuse. And so in preparation for the case, I looked through what was available from the Erlanger records at the time. Jameson had been seen at age 6 weeks with bruises at Erlanger. And so I was able to see those records. At
Did
the
that
time,
include the lab results and any radiographic reports?
it did.
Okay, what else did you review?
The inpatient visitation at the time, so any notes from physicians, any notes from discharge notes there. I was able to also review telephone call between Dr. Garcia and Jameson's PCP, his primary care physician, when his PCP had called Dr. Garcia after he had come in to her office with a mouth injury and a abrasion to his face.
Okay. Did you also obtain a medical history from the mother and the father?
I did.
And as a result, after looking at the Erlanger records, looking at the notes and the radiographs and everything, and getting a history from the mother and father, what did you do then?
Okay. So with getting a medical history from mom and dad, there were definitely things that we wanted to do to make sure that there was nothing else going on with Jameson. And this is part of our general protocol. So whenever children come in with a history of bruising, like he had at Erlanger, even though there were lab work done at Erlanger for bleeding disorders, I wanted to make sure that we repeated those. They were normal at Erlanger, but we repeated them at CHOA, and they were normal at CHOA. The only thing at Erlanger that was a little bit off was with factor 9. But at the time, again, he was 6 weeks old, and factor 9 can be low at 6 weeks because it's just an age aberrancy. And hematology had seen him at Erlanger and that stated that it was an age aberrancy. It was normal at CHOA. The other thing that we did was we always ask parents about their medical history. So part of that asking of the medical history is questioning for any kind of genetic disorders for bone diseases, brittle bone diseases. So we ask things like, anybody in the family have blue or gray sclera? Anybody in the family have stretchy skin or hypermobility of the joints? So like, are you super flexible? Anybody in the family have poor dentition or loss of hearing? All of these questions have to do with, is there a chance that either osteogenesis imperfecta or Ehlers-Danlos runs in the family? Even when the answers don't sound like there's going to be a genetic issue, in cases where children have multiple fractures, and by the time that I was at the bedside for Jameson, we already knew that he had a fracture of his vertebrae T10, and we also knew that he had fractures that were healing on the left on the ribs 8, 9, and 10. So we knew that he had fractures. We also knew that he had an injury to the bottom of his mouth, and we also knew that he had an abrasion to his face. So those are all the injuries that I walked in knowing that he already had. Okay. Nevertheless, even though we knew those things, even though we knew that he had those fractures, and even though the parents didn't sound like they had any history of bone disease in their families or in themselves, we went ahead and ordered testing for osteogenesis imperfecta. Per our protocol, and per protocol, if you look at papers from the American Journal of Genetics, there is a 2013 paper by Dr. Pepin and Dr. Peter Byers. Dr. Peter Byers is the main person who discovered the gene sequencing for osteogenesis imperfecta. So he's kind of the go-to guy in laboratory workup for osteogenesis imperfecta. And the protocol that is followed is that you test for the dominant forms of osteogenesis imperfecta. So there's 3 genes there. The reason that you only test for the dominant forms instead of the extended sequences is that it pretty much covers 95% of all, we'll call it OI,
Judge,
so you don't have to.
I'm going to interpose an objection at this point. She's not a geneticist. I think she's straying way beyond the field of her expertise. So I'll object.
Well,
I'm
and-
going to redirect at this point anyways. I will get to that, and I have some specific questions about what test she ordered and why.
Well, I'm going to sustain his objection, and also, I guess, I would instruct the witness, if you would please answer Ms. Fox's question and not just, we can't just have a monologue here. Just please listen to Ms. Fox's question and answer that question. Go ahead.
My next question is going to be that you did obtain a medical history from the mother and father. As to the injury on the face, who provided the explanation and what was it?
So the explanation for that was that he had probably rubbed it with a mitten. Mother had put some triple ointment on it and some coconut oil on it, and perhaps it had made it worse. The problem with the scratch on his face or the abrasion on his face is that it didn't really look like it would have just been rubbing like that. It was very patterned. It was kind of triangular shape, and it was pretty long. When you see scratches on the face from infants, if you have infants in your life, they do scratch themselves with their fingernails, but they're very superficial, they're pretty short, they heal very quickly. They don't look like a patterned triangle form.
Did the mother indicate whether or not she knew how the injury under the tongue occurred?
The explanation for that was that he puts his hands in his mouth a lot, and maybe that's what it was.
Did they state whether or not he had been in any accidents?
No accidents.
Did you ask whether he'd been in any accidents?
Yes.
Okay. Did they indicate whether or not he had colic or any underlying condition where he'd be crying or gassy or things of that nature?
In the medical records, it was stated that he was a colicky baby. I don't believe that they mentioned that to me.
Okay. Did they tell you where Jameson lived?
In his home with them,
And did they indicate who took care of him?
they did.
Who took care of him?
Mother and father did.
When you got the family history, was she able to stay home with him or did he have to go to a daycare?
Mother stayed home with him.
Now, you indicated that you specifically asked about a family history of osteogenesis imperfecta. Was anything provided about any of the relatives by either Mr. or Ms. Timms?
No history was provided by either of them. And then for them, Mother did mention that she wasn't that particularly flexible, if I remember correctly. There wasn't anything in their medical history that stood out to me that made me think, oh my goodness, this is a case that either of them have Ehlers-Danlos or osteogenesis imperfecta.
Did
But
the mother indicate whether or not she had had any bleeding issues when she was younger?
She did. She mentioned that when she was younger, she went through a workup for bleeding disorders because she had bleeding issues. And all of those workups for her were negative. She was not diagnosed with anything at the time. She denied having any blood transfusions that were needed, so never had any blood transfusions, and her bleeding workup was negative.
And is the fact that she did not need blood transfusions medically significant?
Yes, that's part of the reason why we ask those questions. We want to make sure that we're not missing anything. But even when we get a negative medical history, even when the parents are saying that they don't have anything, it makes our index of suspicion low, so we're not thinking that the child is going to have something, but we're still going to get some of those tests to make sure that we're not missing anything.
Did they indicate whether either one of them had a history of fractures in their family as far as frequent fractures?
No frequent fractures in their family.
Okay. What about any seizures or developmental delays?
No.
Did the mother indicate whether or not she had had any mental health issues?
Mother indicated that she has had some, in the past, some issues with anxiety and depression. She was concerned at the time that she was having postpartum depression, and she stated that she was going to get checked out for that.
Okay. Did you obtain a birth history on Jameson as far as what was the gestational age when he was born?
He was born at 36 weeks.
Okay. Would it be 37 or 36?
Sorry, 37 weeks, yes.
Okay. And do you know whether or not there was a C-section, a normal vaginal delivery, or was it an induced vaginal delivery?
It was a normal delivery from what I can recall, but I'd have to refresh my records.
And did you get that information from the mother or father or both?
From the mother.
Okay. Can you describe Jameson's condition when you did the physical examination of him?
Other than the injuries that I mentioned, he was a healthy, normal-looking baby. There was nothing about him that was concerning.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I'd ask that the witness come down. I've got State's Exhibit Number 1 that I'd like to represent to the jury with her expertise.
You can step down and join Ms. Fox there.
Jack, can you help me get it so that it's clear and no glare? Okay. Dr. Brown, just for the record, I put State's Exhibit Number 1 back on the Elmo system so the jury can see it. You indicated that there was a healing injury to the floor of the mouth. My first question would be, can you identify where you saw the healing injury?
So I saw it on the 14th of January.
And where in the mouth was the injury that you saw?
So it's on the floor of the mouth, close to the frenulum. So the frenulum is that piece of tissue that connects the tongue to the bottom of the mouth.
And can you show the ladies and gentlemen in the jury where the injury is?
So this part here, that is, you've seen the tear. This right here is the actual tear. This outlining it is the circumference of the tear.
Okay. You indicated you marked it as healing. Based on your observation, what led you to believe it was a healing tear as opposed to something that was fresh?
So I believe that this was a picture taken before me by the PCP. So by the time that I saw it, there was some what we call granulation tissue. It's like a little bit of white film of new tissue that is over the injury. It's kind of like a scab on your normal skin, but of course in the mucosa it looks whitish.
And at that point in time, does that part of the body heal quicker or slower than perhaps a scratch on the outside of the skin?
So the mucosa heals a lot faster. If you think about it, when you're chewing something and you bite the side of your mouth, it might really, really hurt, get swollen, it might even bleed a little bit. But in a couple days, 2 or 3 days even, it's completely gone and you can hardly feel it. The mucosa heals very, very quickly.
When it happened, because of the location on the body, would you consider it to be bleeding a lot or not bleeding a lot?
So injuries to the bottom of the mouth, because it's very vascularized, meaning there's a lot of blood vessels that go there, they bleed quite a bit when they happen initially.
And based on your observation on the date that you saw it, which would be January 14th, and you indicated that this appears to be earlier than the condition it was in when you saw it, would you be able to say, is it consistent or inconsistent with something that would be 72 hours or less old?
For this image or when I saw him?
We'll start with when you saw it.
So when I saw him, I would say that it could be 72 hours old.
Okay, what about the image in front of you?
So the image in front of me definitely looks more fresh than that.
Okay. And then based on the location of the injury, what is this mechanism that is most consistent with causing that injury based on your practice and training and experience?
We're always worried about oral injuries in little babies because that's one of the things that's considered a sentinel injury. Sentinel injuries are injuries in small children, usually under the age of 6 months, that can actually be pretty easy to miss or blow off because they don't seem that consequential. That can be a sign that a child is being injured because they can't really do these things to themselves. When you think about a baby, they often put their fingers in their mouth, but we actually rarely see that kind of injury to the floor of the mouth. It's quite a large tear, and it would have actually bled quite a bit. When we look at papers on sentinel injuries, one of the quintessential ones by Dr. Laney Sheets in Pediatric Emergency Care in 2013, oral injuries are one of the most missed forms of injuries that lead to greater forms of abuse later on, or it's indicative of greater forms of abuse later on.
Judge, I'm going to object at this point. I think this is the second time Dr. Brown has attempted to insert into her testimony references from professional journals and articles. That's improper on direct testimony.
I'm going to sustain that objection.
I'll ask another question. Is the injury consistent or inconsistent with something that Jameson could have done to himself?
No.
Why is it inconsistent?
It's inconsistent because injuries to the mouth is not something that a baby could do of this nature. They're not going to be able to tear tissue with enough force of their fingertips to cause that injury to themselves. We typically see these when there's enough force inserted into the mouth, such as a bottle being inserted forcefully or another object being inserted forcefully.
My next question would be consistent or inconsistent with a bottle or a pacifier being shoved in this mouth?
It could be consistent with that, absolutely.
And why is it consistent with that?
Because you would need some sort of object being inserted forcefully into the mouth for that to be able to cause this.
You indicated there was also a scratch on the face. Without publishing the photos first, let me show you this photo. I'm going to hand you what I've marked as State's Exhibit number 7. Don't put it under the glass at this time. Can you recognize State's Exhibit number 7?
Yes.
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of what it purports to show?
Yes.
And did it get tampered with or altered in any way?
No.
Did you take the photo or was it taken in your presence?
I took this photo.
Your Honor, at this point in time, the state would move to publish and tender State's Exhibit number 7.
No, we've already got a 7, Ms. Fox. We've got a 7 and an 8.
All of those were 7 and 8. I will mark it as 9 and 10 then. We'll
Okay.
make this one 9, and I'll make the other one 10. Thank you very much for catching that, Ms. Gina. State would move to tender State's Exhibit number 9.
Any objection to State's Exhibit 9? Ms. Bernard, Mr. Hood?
I was just going to board hear the witness briefly on the
Okay.
circumstances under which
Can I do the, do you need the witness to stand there with
I was
that?
going to put it under here and going to have her point to the photo.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask her to sit down in the witness chair because it's hard to hear for the court reporter while Ms. Bernard voidires her about the picture. So
Okay.
if you can just step back to the witness stand and turn the lights up, please. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Fox has offered State's Exhibit 9. Ms. Bernard, you had some questions about State's 9 from the witness.
Yes, I was going to inquire of Dr. Brown when she took the photograph.
I took the photograph at the bedside when I was there.
And was that your first visit to the bedside of Jameson?
Yes.
Okay. And so his parents were present at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Had you previously viewed any photographs of the abrasion?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. And what did you use to take the picture?
We use our cell phone. We have a program called Epic Haiku that goes straight into the medical record.
Okay. I don't have any further questions, and we don't have any objections to the admission of the photograph.
Okay. Mr. Hood, did you have any objections to State's Exhibit 9? No objection. State's Exhibit 9 will be admitted. Ms. Fox, go ahead with your questions.
Your Honor, I was going to have her go ahead and show the jury
Okay.
where the injury is on the photo. I'll publish it at this time.
Go
And
ahead.
also, she made some directional motions. I'd like her to do it on the photo itself.
Okay. If you'll lower the lights again, and Dr. Hood, step back to the podium there with Ms. Fox.
Dr. Brown, I'm going to ask you what I just told the judge I would. I'd like you to show on the photograph, State's Exhibit number 9, exactly where the injury was.
Right here.
And did it have, you indicated it had a pattern. Can you outline the pattern for the jury?
Yes, may I use your pen?
Yes. Don't draw on it, though.
Oh, sorry. So, here's the bottom of it. It kind of goes up triangularly. Can you guys hear me?
Okay. Did it have any marks within the marks, or did it seem to be consistent in depth and texture all the way through?
It was consistently abraded throughout.
Okay. You took a second, well, I guess you can go back up there. I'll go ahead and finish the questions up on this, and then we'll do the second picture.
If you'll turn the lights back on, please.
Did you take a measurement of this particular abrasion when you saw it?
I don't believe I did.
Okay. And my hypothetical question would be, would this injury that you observed be consistent or inconsistent with somebody grabbing the cheek and then having the, like a wide surface of a nail just scratch right on up?
It could be consistent with that.
Okay. Combined with the other injury, or do you, I guess I'll do the dating on this first. Did it appear to be consistent or inconsistent with something that would have occurred within the past 72 hours?
It could have occurred within the past 72 hours.
Is it consistent or inconsistent when combined with the injury under the tongue of someone grabbing the child's face with the tongue going up and then shoving something in,
It could be consistent with
with the
that.
nail going on up as it's being shoved?
It could be consistent with that.
Okay. Were there any other marks on the child at that time?
There was a bruise on his back.
Okay, I'll walk it to you.
I have what I've marked as State's Exhibit number 10. Can you identify State's Exhibit number 10?
Yes,
Is it a fair and accurate depiction of what it purports to show?
yes,
Has it been tampered or altered within any way?
no,
Did you take that photo?
I did.
Your Honor, at this time, the state will tender State's Exhibit number 10.
Ms. Bernard?
And Your Honor, if we could just review the photograph as they are intending to introduce it.
Okay.
I've already thrown these to the defense.
Yes, and so, and if I could just briefly go over this. So this reference is printed by Brown, Verena W., MD, on February 14th, 2025, 10:15. So that's not when it was taken, that's just when it was printed out?
That's right.
Okay, so when, do you recall what time it was taken?
It was taken at the bedside.
Okay, and that is after Jameson had already had the skeletal survey completed?
Yes,
Okay, so after he had been taken back and x-rayed by the technicians at CHOA?
yes.
No further questions. We have no objection to its admission, Your Honor.
Mr. Hood?
Okay.
State's Exhibit 10 will be admitted.
Can the witness come down and then show what she was trying to picture on the photo?
Certainly. If you'll turn the lights down again, please.
You'll have to talk loud. Can you show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury on State's Exhibit number 10 where the bruise was you were trying to capture?
Yes, and this is a very, very, very small bruise. You know, and every time we see a little mark on a little baby, I do take a photograph of it. But yes, it is a very, very small bruise.
Thank you. Before I totally come off the subject of the marking to the face, was the injury that you observed on the face of Jameson consistent or inconsistent with the child rolling to the right?
No.
Why would it be inconsistent?
There's nothing about a child rolling to the right that would cause a triangular abrasion to his face.
Is there the marking that you saw on his face consistent or inconsistent with brushing his face on a sleeper?
No.
Why is it inconsistent?
But, you know, these are general baby things that babies do. And unless there's something very specific about how a baby is rubbing against the sleeper or how a baby is turning against to the right, in common daily care and practices of babies, they're typically not injured in that way, right? So when we see injuries to baby's face, there's actually a mnemonic called 10-4 faces P. So injuries to the trunk, injuries to the ear, injuries to the neck, injuries in children less than 4 months old, injuries to the face in general, injuries to the angle of the jaw, injuries to the fleshy parts of the cheek, injuries to the eyelids, and injuries to the subconjunctiva, which is the white part of your eye, and injuries and patterns. When we see those in little tiny babies, those are alerts that something may have happened. Are they always indicative that it's abuse? No, you have to talk to the parents. You have to see if there's a history that is provided. Sometimes wacky accidents happen, absolutely, right? Sometimes babies have bleeding issues, right? You have to check for those. But those injuries in those locations are rare enough that in our literature, we know that when we see them, we have to be thinking, is something happening here that we have to be worried about?
I'm going to move on to the bruise on the back. Did the parents have an explanation as to how the bruise on the back occurred?
No, but they did mention that it wasn't there when they arrived to CHOA.
Okay. And you did not have personal contact with Jameson until you were at bedside.
That's right.
And the bruise itself Was there anything about it that you would able to say whether or not it's something that happened within the past 2 or 3 hours, or whether that be something that had been there a while?
No, there's nothing I could say one way or another.
Okay. Was a skeletal survey done of Jameson?
Yes.
You had indicated you already knew the results before you met with the family and looked at Jameson personally?
Yes.
Okay. On the skeletal survey, did it show any injuries to the ribs?
Yes.
What injuries did he have to the ribs?
He had healing fractures on the left side of the posterior ribs, 8, 9, and 10.
How pliable are babies' ribs?
So they're very pliable. Babies' ribs are compressible. It takes quite a bit of force outside of normal parenting in order to break a baby's ribs. And that's because of just the collagen content of the ribs in comparison to adults. For us, it's a lot easier to break ribs or any kind of bones. If you think about just this analogy, a green stick of a tree that's pretty fresh, you have to really wiggle it to break, versus a dry stick of a tree, snap it into pretty easily. So that's how I think about when I explain fractures of babies to non-medical people, because that's what we're dealing with.
Is there anything about the location of these particular breaks that would make it harder or easier to break?
So in our literature, posterior rib fractures are,
Judge, again, if she wants to testify based upon her own knowledge and training and experience on direct, that's permissible. She cannot reference literature in her testimony.
Okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to give the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm going to give you an afternoon break. If you'll go, I'm going to speak to the attorneys here. I want you to stay in the courtroom with me. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you can go ahead and take your break, please. Everyone, please be seated. So when the ladies and gentlemen of the jury come back in the courtroom, I'm going to sustain Mr. Hood's objection. That's the third time he's made that objection.
I understand.
And he's exactly, and I know you know, he's exactly accurate on the law as that goes. Now, I'm going to say this. Ms. Fox is asking her questions very specifically and very exactly as well. And Ms. Fox, I'm going to give you a chance to speak with your witness during our break. It is very important that you listen to Ms. Fox's questions and you answer just the question as it's presented. And every time she does this, I'm going to grant Mr. Hood's objection when he stands up, because that is not a proper answer to the question that's being presented. We're going to take a break. I'll let
Yes,
you
ma'am.
speak to your witness. The ladies and gentlemen of the jury are back in the courtroom from our afternoon stretch break. Before we took our break, Mr. Hood had made a motion, or had made an objection, rather, to testimony that was being offered by the state. The court would sustain that objection, and the court would instruct the witness to answer the question as asked by Ms. Fox. Ms. Fox, if you'll please redirect your witness.
Yes, ma'am. My question is the location of the breaks on the ribs closer to the spine make it more difficult or less difficult to break?
yes, posterior rib fractures are known to be more difficult to cause because of their location close to the spine. Again, if we use our analogy of the tree, if you try to break the limb of a tree closer to the trunk, you're going to need more force than if you're trying to break it closer to the outside of the tree. It's the same idea. The spine is able to stabilize that rib so that you really need to pull harder in order to make that break. Rib fractures are caused by that compression with the chest. And so with that levering of the spine with the posterior ribs there, you really just are going to need a lot more force there.
Was there any explanation of any accidental injury that could have caused the fractures that were observed given to you?
No.
Have you seen accidental injuries in infants' ribs before?
Yes.
What type of accident would be typical for that type of injury?
We see them in motor vehicle collisions. We see them in crush injuries, large objects falling on children, sometimes even complicated co-falls, like a child falling down the stairs in the arms of a parent where the parent falls on the child. So complicated accidents in the home can cause rib fractures as well.
Do babies typically experience pain when they have a fracture similar to an adult?
Yes.
How long does it take to have a callus appear on the bone once it's broken?
We typically see them on radiograph in 10 to 14 days.
And on the callusing, just so the ladies and gentlemen can understand clearly, is that just like the little bump or knot that kind of your body forms over the break itself?
Yes.
Okay. Without an accidental explanation, is the rib fractures that you saw consistent or inconsistent with child abuse?
So whenever we see rib fractures in children and there's no accidental mechanism, they are going to be most consistent with abuse with a healthy child.
Okay. Hypothetically, if Jamison had x-rays taken on December the 8th of 2021 that did not show any rib fractures, and he presented at CHOA on January the 14th with rib fractures, is it consistent or inconsistent that the time frame for those injuries to occur would have occurred at some point between the December 8th date and about 7 to 10 days before he presented at CHOA?
That's correct. That would be consistent.
And why is that consistent?
Again, because of the healing of the injuries. So we know that you need at least 10 to 14 days for callus formation to be seen on an x-ray.
Would the rib fractures be consistent or inconsistent with something that Jamison could have done for himself?
No, at 3 months of age, there's nothing that he would have done to himself to cause a rib fracture.
Is it consistent or inconsistent with an injury that could have occurred when he was born?
No, those rib fractures showing up at the time frame that they did would be inconsistent with birth. And we very, very rarely see rib fractures, especially posteriorly from birth.
Why do you not see the posterior because of birth?
Once again, posterior fractures are more difficult to occur. More complicated births in children especially children who have, brittle bone diseases can happen, but in normal children with normal deliveries, we just really don't see posterior rib fractures happening because of the way the children come from the birth canal. There's no reason to squeeze the rib cage.
Do you often see rib fractures with no internal injuries to any of the organs?
Very commonly. There's the way that the mechanism of rib fractures being caused, you don't necessarily have any kind of internal organ injury. Sometimes, if it's a very large blow to the chest, we might see liver injury. But typically on those children, we also see exquisite amounts of other, often fatal injuries as well.
I want to talk about the compression injury to T10. How many compression fractures typically come through CHOA in a given year?
We see several in the year. They're not that common, but we see a number of them.
How often do you see them in babies?
Babies, not often at all, very rarely.
Okay. Outside of child abuse, what is a typical mechanism that would cause a compression injury in a baby?
Again, complicated falls. We do see them when children fall like directly on their head. We see them with hyperextension of the spine with long falls from very tall heights, children falling from windows, things like that. Again, motor vehicle accidents, things of that nature.
You gave us an analogy of a green twig versus a dry old stick. Is there any analogy that the jury could compare a compression injury through that would make sense to people who are not medical experts?
So typically what we think of with compression fractures to the spine is what we call axial loading. So axial loading is when you take a force from above or below and you crush from that direction. So think about crushing a Coke can from top to bottom like this.
And are the compression fractures painful?
Yes.
Without an accidental injury or a explanation for how that occurred outside of child abuse, is this consistent or inconsistent with child abuse to have a fracture of T10?
So again, without a history of an accident, it's going to be very concerning. And when you think about a diagnosis of child abuse, you can't take each injury in a vacuum. So you have to think about Jameson as a whole. He had the compression of T10 in and of itself without any kind of disease, without any kind of accidental mechanism is concerning. He had 3 rib fractures that were healing without any kind of disease and without any kind of accidental mechanism that in and of itself is concerning. He had a scratch to his face that didn't look like a typical baby scratch that in and of itself is concerning. And he had that significant laceration to the bottom of his mouth in and of itself is concerning. And he had a history of bruising at Erlanger that after 2 times having laboratory workup for bleeding disorders that were negative were unexplained, that in and of itself is concerning. So his whole constellation of symptoms is diagnostic of abuse.
Did you speak to the parents further?
In further about,
There during the visit, after you reviewed Jameson's physical appearance?
yes,
Did they ever provide an explanation for any of the injuries you've just reviewed with the jury?
well, again, they talked about the mouth with the hands. They talked about the face with the mitten. They didn't give any explanation for the fractures.
Okay. Did the mother indicate whether or not she took her mental health medications during her pregnancy?
She did not.
And is that important?
But
Foundation for this question, there's certainly been no testimony elicited about mental health medications being taken by the mother, and so I don't think that's a proper question the foundation has relayed.
Ms. Fox?
Your Honor, I definitely think it needs to be addressed with this particular specialist. We are expecting a defense specialist to state that certain medications might have caused these injuries, and I want to know whether she told this doctor she was taking any.
And, Your Honor, if she's referring to the blood pressure medication that was taken during the pregnancy, then again, I think this mental health medications references is referring to things certainly not in evidence.
Well, I think I'll sustain the objection. I'll let you redirect the question as to any medications. I don't know that we need to classify what type of medications, but.
Did the mother indicate whether or not she took medications during her pregnancy?
She did not indicate any medications to me.
And is that a question that you asked on purpose?
Yes.
Why did you ask that question?
Well, we typically want to know how moms are doing with their mental health at the time of the visit.
Did the mother indicate whether or not she was going to seek help for postpartum?
She did.
Did the mother or father report any family history that would contribute to a genetic explanation for any of the findings that you saw?
They did not.
How often do you see rib and compression fractures, but no injuries to the head? For example, many of us have heard of a shaken baby case where they might have had the blood in the eyes and the blood in the brain. How often do you see them separate for those cases?
Quite frequently, actually.
Okay. If we were going to classify the 100 cases that might come through in a year, if it was 100, what percentage would be just rib and compression as opposed to also having petechiae and subdural hematomas and things of that nature?
That's a hard question to think about. I have to think about all my cases. It's probably at least a good 50%, if not more. But that's a very ballpark figure.
Okay. Now, did you order additional testing to rule out other medical causes?
Yes.
Specifically, did you order more lab work to either confirm or rule out a bleeding disorder?
Yes.
Why did you do that?
This is what we do with any child that has a history of bruising.
And what were the results of the tests that you ordered?
Everything was normal on Jameson.
Now, you've already referenced it, but I'm going to go into it in a little bit more detail. You ordered genetic testing,
I did.
and you indicated that you did a 3-panel test.
Yes.
The 3-panel test, what does it test for in relation to, for example, osteogenesis imperfecta?
Yeah, so it's the 3 dominant forms of osteogenesis imperfecta. This is per protocol from genetics. When you read the protocols in the American Journal of Geneticists.
Now, we're not going to read anything.
Sorry,
We're just going to
sorry.
talk about what you ordered and why.
Sorry about that. It's a bad habit, to quote the literature. So we do that for protocol purposes that our geneticists have asked us to do.
And did you get the results back?
Yes.
Did it have any variance?
Yes, there was a variant of unknown significance.
What does that mean?
So sometimes when you do genetic testing, there will be mutations in the exon of the gene that shows up in populations that, they're likely not pathogenic. So what happens when that is the case for us, since we're the ordering physicians, the first thing that we do is we call up our geneticists, run it by them. They look at that particular variant, and they're able to look at it and see if it's a common variant that they see clinically or not, and if it's a variant that causes problems.
So if it's a variant that causes problems, what do they call that?
Pathogenic.
Okay, is there a level below pathogenic?
Insignificant.
I'm sorry?
Insignificant.
Insignificant. If we were going to classify variants, do they run like pathogenic, likely pathogenic, variant of unknown significance, not likely, and then complete it, like at the bottom, something along those lines, like a scale?
That's a good question for the geneticist.
Okay. But this one came back variable of unknown significance.
Correct.
Did you order additional testing?
No. When we talked to our genetics department, the recommendation was that this was not a worrisome variant, but we did refer them to Emory Genetics.
Do you know whether that was ever followed up on?
I do know, and no, they did not follow up on Emory Genetics.
And when you say you referred them, who did you refer to Emory Genetics?
Well, I referred Jameson to Emory Genetics, the family.
But Jameson did not end up there?
No.
Okay. Did you look at his vitamin D?
Yes.
What was his vitamin D level?
32.
What is considered normal?
That is a very good normal score.
Okay. What is abnormal for vitamin D?
So anything less than 20 is insufficient to vitamin D.
And his came in at 32?
Yes.
Did you look at his phosphorus?
Yes.
What was his phosphorus?
It was normal. I would have to look at the exact number, refresh my memory.
Did you test for Willebrand?
Yes.
Did he have any variants that would indicate that that was the cause?
No, it was all normal.
What is Willebrand?
So von Willebrand is a factor that tests for von Willebrand disease. Von Willebrand disease is a bleeding disorder. It's typically pretty mild, but it can cause bruising. Within the von Willebrand panel is also factor 8. Factor 8 is something that can affect von Willebrand, but it can also is the cause of hemophilia if it's low. Jameson's was slightly elevated, which is not concerning because factor 8 is also called something that's a acute phase reactant. An acute phase reactant is something that the body does when the body is slightly stressed, such as when you have fractures. It's only concerning when it's low. So for the purposes of bleeding disorders, everything was normal.
Did you order osteogenesis imperfecta testing?
Yes.
What was the results?
So that was the variant of unknown significance
Okay.
that we referred to genetics, and Jameson was not able to go.
If a baby had osteogenesis imperfecta, how rare would it be for it to have broken ribs as opposed to the long bones?
So osteogenesis imperfecta tends to affect the long bones of the body, so think arms, legs. It doesn't typically affect the axial skeleton, so skull, ribs. It can, but it's exceedingly rare.
Okay. What was his factor 9 assay results?
Yeah, we're normal.
What is that?
So factor 9, like factor 8, is a clotting factor that, if it's low, can be significant for hemophilia. Now, if you remember, we talked about earlier how at Erlanger at 6 weeks, it was slightly low. In tiny babies, factors can be aberrant. They can be a little bit low because there is no good value, no good standards for little babies. It doesn't mean that they have it. By the time they are a couple months old, they peak to normal older kid adult values, and that's exactly what Jameson's did.
And what was his platelet count?
Normal.
Were there any issues with his heart?
No.
Were there any issues with his thyroid?
No.
Were there any concerns about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome?
No.
Why not?
So Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, when you are Jameson's age, so the hypermobile type, which occurs in 80% of people, you really can't test for it until you have skeletal maturity, which means that until like you're a teenager. The reason why that is that babies by nature are hypermobile. Think about a baby. They're very bendy. And so any testing for Ehlers-Danlos in a baby is really not going to be clinically significant. The other thing is that for other forms of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, you would have other issues with your body that you could see. Things like club feet, things like your actual frenulum that we talked about earlier would be non-existent. Things like papules on your skin, things like if you put a Band-Aid on, your skin would rip. You would have clinical signs that Jameson did not have.
Okay. Now, I don't want to gloss over it, but in your initial questions to the parents, the mother indicated that she was not flexible. What was that conversation?
She indicated that, I remember she was talking a lot actually about her sister being way more flexible than she was. And the context of that conversation was, I always ask those screening questions for families, and part of that is both for screening for OI and screening for Ehlers-Danlos.
Okay.
And it is important. I mean, just the other day, I had a mom that we ended up thinking was Ehlers-Danlos because of what her symptoms were. So you have to make sure that you're not missing anything in the parents as well. There was no indication for either parents that's, yes, this is something that we absolutely need to be worried about.
Okay. Did you see Jameson again on June the 16th?
I did.
Was a skeletal survey ordered?
Yes,
Did you also do a physical examination of Jameson?
I did.
Did he have any new fractures or bruises or anything along those lines?
He didn't, and this is really important. This is so important because if you have a genetic problem, it doesn't go away. It doesn't just spontaneously cure itself. By the time I saw Jameson at 8 months, he was pulling to a stand, and he was in his aunt's care at the time, and I asked her, he's pulling to a stand, does he fall? And she said, yes, he falls.
So I'll sustain that objection.
You can't say what she told you at that point in time, but did you have any indication that he had received any new bruises or any new breaks based on his new skill of being able to pull up?
Based on his new skill of being able to pull up, he had not sustained any new breaks or any new bruises. And we would expect that if he were a fragile child, that he would have significantly more reason to have new breaks and new bruises.
Okay. I'm going to go back to the conversations you had with the parents, specifically in January of 2022. Did the parents mention whether or not they left with Jameson to other locations or stayed at the home?
They indicated that they mostly stayed at the home.
And how did Miss Timms view Dr. Pritchett during your conversations with her?
She was not happy.
But
I'm not
What?
sure which doctor they're actually referring to here. If it's Dr. Harmon Pickett, that may have been the question, and I still think it is seeking to elicit improper hearsay.
Okay, what is your question, Ms. Fox, if you'll refresh?
That is certainly the doctor I'm referring to, and there was a specific comment made, and the state would like to elicit that during the course of the conversation that was between Ms. Timms and this doctor.
Ms. Timms and which doctor? This witness or
Dr.
Dr.
Brown,
Harmon Pickett?
specifically.
This
Ms.
witness-
Timms made the statement to Dr. Brown.
To Dr. Brown. Okay, do you have an objection to that question?
I mean, we will certainly hear her testimony regard that, if that would be admissible, but again, I was just concerned about which doctor we were talking about.
Yeah,
What statement was made in your presence, or to you?
That she would be finding another pediatrician.
How many children were referred to the CHOA child abuse specialist during the time frame of 2022 to 2023?
I believe it was around 2,000 or so.
And how many of those cases did your team actually complete consultations on?
I believe it was around 200 or so.
How many of the specialists do you have on your team?
3.
And out of the ones that were completed, how many actually came back as child abuse?
So out of the patients that we saw, 35% were diagnosed as child abuse.
And after examining Jameson, reviewing his medical history, are the injuries and symptoms on Jameson Timms consistent or inconsistent with child abuse?
Given all of the constellation of findings, the bruises at Erlanger, the mouth injury and the facial abrasion, the 3 rib fractures and the vertebral fracture, all of the constellations of findings in a healthy baby that was confirmed at 8 months visit, and no accidents, we did find that Jameson was a victim of child abuse.
Your witness.
Mr. Hood?
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
You go back to November of...
Okay, time out just a minute. And Mr. Hood, the witness is with you, sir.
Thank you, Judge. Dr. Brown, obviously in your treatment of Jameson and in terms of the conclusions that you have reached regarding Jameson, you have relied, it sounds like, somewhat extensively on records from Erlanger Hospital dating back to November of 2021. Is that correct?
I have relied somewhat on them.
Okay. And you have mentioned a concept frequently during your direct testimony that Jameson reported to Erlanger, I think the phrase that you used in your records was with extensive bruising.
Yes.
And you indicated that you had seen pictures of that bruising.
Yes.
What if those aren't bruises?
To me, they were bruises, and also in medical records at Erlanger, over and over, they were called bruises by the physicians there, by the pediatricians there, and also, by everybody that saw the patient there.
Okay. And you're familiar, obviously, with what bruises are, correct?
That's correct.
If I told you that these purple markings on Jameson that you saw in a photograph and referenced in your records had completely disappeared within 48 hours, is that consistent with a bruise in your experience?
Well, that's actually incorrect information if you look at the records.
Answer my question. If those markings had completely disappeared within 48 hours, is that consistent with a bruise?
In a baby, it can be, actually.
You referenced blood work at Erlanger. And do you recall noting in your records at least a couple of places that the blood work at Erlanger was not complete?
Yes.
Your understanding that blood work at Erlanger had been lost.
Yes.
You understand that there was, according to the lab at Erlanger, a concerning result in terms of the factor IX assay, which you referenced deals with clotting ability, correct?
That's right. We talked about that on direct.
You also understand that a complete workup was done of this child at Erlanger, and he was released to his parents. Is that correct?
Yes.
I presume, based upon some notes in your records, that you don't agree that that should have happened.
There was concern. I know that he was seen by the child abuse pediatrician there, and she actually noted concern in the chart as well.
And once the child left Erlanger and went home, on at least 2 occasions, the Department of Family and Children Services investigated this home. Are you aware of that?
In the in-between,
Yes.
I was not aware of that.
Did you ever ask that question?
Not specifically.
You dealt with defects at the hospital in January, correct?
Yes.
Extensively.
As per what we usually do, yes.
Okay. In fact, you have a defects liaison who works full-time in your hospital, correct?
She works for defects, and well, we actually have a couple of them, but they work for defects. They're employees for defects, but they do see cases with us, yes.
Okay. So if you need information from defects, you have no trouble getting information from defects, correct?
That's correct.
But you're not going to get answers to questions that you don't ask, right?
That's right.
Are you aware in November when the child presented to his primary care physician, his pediatrician, Dr. Harbin Pickett, she indicated that the markings on this young man did not look like bruises to her?
From the medical record, she sent them in because they looked like bruises to her.
Well, she testified yesterday. Would it surprise you to know that her testimony yesterday was that she made the referral to Erlanger because she was worried about a potentially dangerous blood disorder, not bruising on this child?
That would not surprise me.
The child presented to CHOA on the 13th of January. Is that your recollection?
Yes.
And was discharged on the 15th of January.
Yes.
And the records indicate that while there, he was resting comfortably, correct?
It depends on what page of the medical record you're looking at.
Well, let me say this. Overall, was this a baby that appeared to be in distress?
At times, he was crying.
Okay. Well, was it at times when he was with his parents, or was he crying when he was removed from his parents?
Both. When I was in the room with his parents, he was definitely crying.
At times, the records indicate that he was fussy, but his parents were able to console him. Is
Yes.
that correct? What was viewed then as an emergency that day potentially was a dot or a mark underneath his tongue, as y'all's records reflect. Is that correct?
There was a injury to the floor of his mouth.
And do your records refer to that as a tear or as an injury?
My particular report,
Yes.
I would have to refresh my memory as exactly what I wrote. If you have my report, I'm happy to refresh my memory.
I'll get back to it, and we'll certainly give you an opportunity to do that. That marking under the tongue is what prompted you, I presume, to order x-rays of the child.
So I did not order x-rays. X-rays were done prior to my consultation.
Okay. And was there a Dr. Eanes, am I saying that name correctly, or Dr. Fleming?
Dr. Fleming was the attending physician on the floor, so she was the one primarily taking care of him.
Okay. And you indicated that your involvement began, I presume, when the images were reviewed and the rib fractures were noted, correct?
No, the whole sequence of events was that, if I'm permitted to tell the story, Dr. Harbin had called Dr. Garcia because she had seen Jameson in her clinic. She had seen the injuries on the face and in the mouth. Dr. Garcia is the child abuse pediatrician at Erlanger. She was concerned for these injuries because these are sentinel injuries for abuse. They discussed, and Dr. Harbin then called defects. I'm not exactly sure how they found out that Jameson was then going to go to CHOA instead of back to Erlanger. But Dr. Garcia called me the next day to give me a heads up, because I was the physician on call for CHOA, that Jameson was going to come. So I was waiting for his arrival. When he arrived, he went to the ED, got admitted to Dr. Fleming. Dr. Fleming let me know. But by the time that all of that had happened and Dr. Fleming let me know, he already had had his skeletal survey and all the imaging and a lot of the blood work done.
Okay. So let me make sure I understand your testimony. Prior to this child's arrival at the hospital, you're telling me that you had already been called by another, what you refer to as child abuse pediatrician, and given a heads up about this child?
Yeah, she was concerned. She had been concerned because she was aware of, obviously, what had happened at Erlanger, of his bruises there. And she had been called by Dr. Harbin because she was concerned for abuse from what she had been seen in clinic. And since I had happened to be the person on call for CHOA that day. Now, I didn't know when Jameson was going to come in, but I still happened to be on call when he came in, so.
Okay. The rib fractures you indicated were injuries that would require a great deal of force, in your opinion.
Yes.
Your record indicates that you were suspicious of the rib fractures for one reason, because they were posterior. Is that correct?
Any rib fracture on an infant is going to be concerning, any of them, any location. Posterior rib fractures are concerning for location, but anterior, lateral, it doesn't matter. As a whole, they're going to be concerning.
Is one more likely to be indicative of abuse, in your opinion, than the other, posterior or anterior?
I would say that we become more concerned based on our literature.
Not asking you about your literature. Testify about your knowledge, your training, and your experience.
I'm sorry, I thought I could on cross, my
You can
mistake.
if I ask you. I'm not asking you about your literature.
Okay. So, I will say that any location for a rib fracture is going to be concerning. Posterior rib fractures require more force, but even if they had been anterior or lateral, I would have been concerned.
Your record in this case indicates, does it not, that you were more concerned based upon the fact that these were posterior fractures?
Yes.
That's what you put in your record.
Yes.
All right. I've got a book in my hand. It's entitled Child Abuse, Medical Diagnosis and Management. You've got the same book.
I have an autographed copy, in fact.
So I don't need to ask you if this is an authoritative book or periodical in your field, do I?
No, you don't.
You would consent to that. I've got the 4th edition of that. Which edition do you have?
4th edition, yes.
So if you would turn on your 4th edition, please, ma'am, to page 117.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sort of in the middle of the page, doctor, where it says rib fractures.
Yes.
And I think that's all. Well, there's two paragraphs on that, under that subheading. But so I'm on the top paragraph. And it indicates in this, I'll use the phrase textbook for lack of a better phrase. There are studies that have showed that anterior rib fractures are the most common form of rib fractures in abuse, and the predictive value of posterior rib fractures was not consistent. Overall, the specific location of the rib fractures was not directly correlated to the likelihood of abuse. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Okay. So, contrary then to what you noted in your records, the fact that these were posterior rib fractures in and of themselves does not make it more likely that they were the result of abuse. Is
So
that
I'm
correct?
allowed to talk about the literature now?
Sure.
Okay.
Asked you about it.
So if you actually look at this paragraph, you'll notice little numbers by them. These are the references. This is reference 30. So this is a paper by Dr. Kemp that was written in 2010. I actually have it with me if you'd like to look at it. I can pull it out if you need it, but I can just quote it if you'd prefer. Dr. Kemp wrote this paper. It was called a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is when you look at multiple papers in the literature throughout time, and you compare them and you see what they say. And he looked at multiple different bones. So when you look at the section of ribs, he does state that location didn't seem to necessarily indicate with posterior rib fractures because he used the word variability in the studies. What he noted in 3 different studies is that one study sustained what we had been believing about posterior rib fractures, but that 2 studies showed this variability. When I looked at the 2 studies individually, one was by Dr. CHOA, which I believe was 2008, and one was by Dr. Bullock, was a little bit earlier. What they had compared was abused children, but with other kinds of more violent accidents, so motor vehicle accidents, crush injuries, things like that. And in those more violent states, it really didn't matter. But those studies, again, were from 2012 and earlier. There actually have been studies published later than that, 2015, and then I think Dr. Chris published one in 2020, and Dr. Berenson published one in 2021 that do confirm that posterior rib fractures, as we have been noting for a long time, are more difficult to cause.
When was that book published?
This was... for the date here. So 3rd edition was 2009.
If I told you 2020, would that be helpful?
The American Academy of Pediatrics was copyright 2020 by American Academy of Pediatrics.
All right,
And-
so according to the authors of that textbook in 2020, the lesson they want to impart upon students who read that textbook, those aspiring pediatricians who want a specialty in child abuse, is that the location of rib fractures is not predictive of whether or not child abuse has occurred.
I think we can argue that in editions of books with minor points of, well, I'm not saying minor points, but with points like that, they may or may not have updated on the literature that had just come out that year, right? Because if you look at Chris's study, it also had come out in 2020, and the next study had come out in 2021. So I'm not sure if it's fair to call that out, first of all. Second of all, the other part of it is that even if Jamison had had anterior or lateral rib fractures, I would still have called it.
It's just that you noted in your records that the fact that they were posterior in your mind, it made it more likely that they were abuse.
Sure. And so we have a study from 2020, the same year
Not-
that this was
not asking
published,
you about a
and a
study
study from
So, wait,
2021.
wait just a minute, wait just a minute.
Michael,
She does have the right to explain.
well, she
I
got to
know,
answer the question
but-
first.
Well, he has a right to finish his question before she starts answering. So finish your question, Mr. Hood, and then you can answer his question.
The question is this. The authors of the textbook that teach aspiring folks in your field reached the conclusion that they reached on page 117.
Again,
Yes or no?
yes, but based on 2 studies on accidental injuries that called things variable from a study in 2012. You have to read the fine print. And those things were updated the same year that this came out, and then the following year. So at some point, you have to stay updated, because now it's 2025.
Regarding the rib fractures, you gave the analogy of younger twig or stick versus older stick. Did I hear that correctly?
You did.
Takes more force on the younger stick, the green stick, to bend it and break it.
Yes.
Jameson did not report with any chest wall injuries, is that correct?
That's right.
Any abdominal injuries?
No.
Any injuries to his back?
Well, I mean, he had the fracture of T10.
We'll get to that in a minute. But any other injuries to his back?
He had that little bruise, which, you know, it's hard to say.
Nothing on the outside of his torso
No.
indicated that he had been subjected to any great amount of physical trauma. Is that correct?
That's right. And that is actually a very typical thing. So when you look at Peters 2010, and she talks about fractures and bruising, and there are other. different-
Dr. Brown,
Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't ask me about literature.
regarding the fracture at T10,
Yes.
you, as I understand it, it would be Dr. Dixon who was responsible for the review of those images, and that's with whom you consulted regarding those images, is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Would you agree with me, in your records indicate, that regarding that fracture, the language that she used was that whatever she saw on the image suggests a fracture
Yes.
of T10. She did not say, in relation to ribs, that what she saw on the image suggests healing fractures of the ribs. She said the ribs were fractured.
Yes.
Okay. Do you agree with me that that's the verbiage that she used at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And you consulted with her about that?
Yes.
When is the last time that you spoke either with her or with any other doctor related to this matter?
I spoke with her maybe 2 weeks ago.
In preparation for testimony today?
Yes,
Did y'all discuss this case?
we did.
Did you discuss items other than what you guys were going to wear to court?
Yes, of course.
If her recollection was different than that, does that surprise you?
I'm sorry, what?
If her recall of that conversation was that the sole limited purpose of y'all's discussion was to discuss what she was going to wear to court today, would that surprise you?
I mean, we did discuss that, but we went over some images, not necessarily what was going to be said, but we went over images, yes.
Did the word suggest come up during that conversation?
I don't think so.
at some point after your consultation with, I'm presuming Dr. Dixon, you met with both the parents, Brady and Carrie Timms, in their hospital room. And I think if I recall, the child was present in the room at that time. Is that right?
Yes,
And you discussed with them the images and the report that had been made to you regarding those images. Is that true?
that's right.
And you indicated during that conversation that essentially interpreting radiographic images was not your cup of tea, it was not your specialty.
That's right, I did.
In fact, you indicated at least a couple of times during that conversation, you couldn't even see what they were talking about regarding T10 because vertebral fractures are very hard to see.
Yes, so if I remember correctly, what I was saying is that the T10 fracture was very difficult for me to see, that I'm not a pediatric radiologist, which is true. And I didn't want them to, I thought that was the one that it was, but I didn't want them to take my word for it because I didn't want to be telling them the incorrect thing.
And later on in that conversation, you indicated to them, and I think there was another lady that was present with you. Was that the DFACS liaison during that conversation?
Yes, yes,
You indicated to the parents that you wanted to see what was going on here. Blood work had been taken. It was going to be sent off for testing.
yes,
And I'm not going to quote you, but I'll probably get pretty close. And you kind of said, well, the thing that stinks about that is it takes a couple of months to get the results back.
that's right.
All right. So, how many hours later were these two folks escorted from this hospital by a security guard and told they could not see their child? And, well, let me stop there. How many hours later?
I'm not sure how many hours later, but I believe it was the same day.
I told you about 2 hours later. Does that sound about right?
I really am not sure, but it certainly could be.
Had the blood work that y'all took to send off to see what was going on even been placed in the mail at that point?
For OI, it had been taken, but probably not sent, no.
You participated in a conference call if I'm reading your record correctly, on January the 14th at 2022 at approximately 2:50 p.m., or at least that's what your notes indicate. Present on that call was yourself and Ann Ray. Is that the DFACS liaison?
Yes,
Dr. Fleming,
yes.
Detective Faulkner,
I don't remember the name of the detective.
but a detective.
Yes,
RN Katie,
I don't remember the name of the RN, but an RN.
Lori Stanfield from DFACS,
Yes,
Heather Gates from DFACS.
yes.
The record indicates that lab work was going to be obtained to rule out a bleeding disorder on bone health issues. And then it says DFACS was advised to take action in regards to planning for patient safety. Is that accurate?
If that is a defects note, I'm not sure what they would have written, but certainly in these cases, we do recommend safety of the child. Now, what that means from a defects perspective, we don't know. We're mandated reporters, and then defects has to make that decision. One of the things per protocols is that we know that child abuse cases, happen about
Judge, I would-
600,000 a
I would
year.
object at
Wait,
this point.
wait just a minute.
It's just completely non-responsive. She answered my question. I would object.
I-
I'm not asking about her protocols.
I'm going to sustain that objection. Please listen to the question as asked by Mr. Hood and answer that question. And Mr. Hood, you can rephrase your question.
Did you or any other medical professional, to your knowledge, at CHOA, advise DFACS to take custody of this child?
No,
Any record that indicates that you did is mistaken.
yes,
The blood work was sent off, and results came back with a variant at the COL 1A2 area
yes,
on the genes. Is that correct?
yes,
That is a site, I believe, that where collagen is produced.
yes,
Collagen is sort of the building block, the fiber of our system. Is that correct? Bones, blood vessels, arteries, ligaments, tendons.
you can say it that way, yes.
Okay. A problem with collagen production could cause trouble for any or all of those systems. Is that right?
Yes,
The variation that came back was determined to be a variation of either, I see it both ways. Some call it uncertain significance, some call it unknown significance, but VUS is the nomenclature that's used.
Yes.
Correct?
yes,
All right. So, may be significant, it may have no significance, right?
technically, that is true.
All right. If you went home today and you pulled up an email or read an article or a book, and it said this particular variant, more research has been done, more time has passed, it's now pathogenic, connective tissue disorder. Would that change your outlook on this case?
It would not, because, as we mentioned before, the purpose of talking to genetics, as we did, was to see if this was going to be at all at risk for becoming pathogenic. In addition-
Understand my question. Hold on a second.
It's
I'm
very
asking you to-
difficult
Okay,
so that the jury understands.
Well,
I'm
wait just a
asking you
minute,
to
wait just a minute.
I object to him interrupting her. She has a right to explain the answer. He's cut her off twice. I didn't object the first time. She has a right to explain.
Okay. Again, I'm going to ask ladies and gentlemen of the jury to step to the jury room just a moment. Ms. Fox, what's your objection?
My objection is the witness does have the right to explain her answer, and the fashion in which she was doing it was perfectly appropriate. She was not citing literature. She was listing the reasons that she would not change her opinion, and that is something she's entitled to explain. The fact that he doesn't like her answer is not a reason to cut her off. She didn't violate any of the guidelines the court laid out. She hasn't violated any other rules. She's explaining why she would not change her opinion.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Hood, what is your objection?
Judge, the problem is, she's an expert, so I get to ask her a hypothetical question. She has to answer the question with the assumption that I have put in place. She can't change the assumption and basically avoid answering the question, which is exactly what she was in the process of attempting to do. So,
Well, I'm going to say this, and this has been a continuing problem during this testimony this afternoon. It's very important that the witness listen to the question. And yes, the witness is entitled to explain their answer. But what I can't have is two people talking at the same time, because the court reporter can't take that down. And you can't talk over each other. Again, you can't talk at the same time. Also, I think it's very important to remember we can't just have these monologue answers. I mean, this witness is an expert, and I'm going to concur with Mr. Hood's objection in that he's entitled to present a hypothetical. She has to answer the question as presented, and then she can explain her answer after that. But she can't change the question.
I beg to differ, because she did answer it. She said she would not change her opinion and was in the process of explaining why she would not change her. That's a direct answer to his hypothetical. I would not, because she's entitled to say why.
Well, well, wait a minute, I haven't heard, Ms. Bernard, you get the floor for a minute as well.
The presumption in my question, the underlying assumption in my question was that the variant was deemed to be pathogenic. She began her answer after she said no by saying, I've reached out to our geneticist and it's not likely to be pathogenic. It completely avoids the hypothetical that I gave her.
I understand. I understand your objection. Ms. Bernard.
Thank you, Your Honor, and that was what our concern was on Ms. Tim's behalf, is that this person who has been put forward as an expert was in fact not answering the hypothetical question and was changing the facts to suit the answer that she wanted to give.
Well, I feel courts will say this to all the, and I know we've got a lot of experts to come here in the coming days as we go forward. You know, we've already listened to 3 expert witnesses today. They rendered their opinions based upon review of their records and the questions that were presented here. This afternoon, it has been a continuing struggle to listen to the questions, and I mean, I will find this witness continues to, it's like we've got an answer we want to get out there, and we're going to get that answer out there whether or not that question is asked or not. So again, I'm going to instruct the witness to listen to the question that's asked, and then if you want to redirect her on another issue on that regard, Ms. Fox, then she can answer your question in that regard. But she's got to answer the question that's asked by Mr. Hood or by Ms. Bernard or whomever on cross. You can redirect her if you have a different hypothetical that you want to pose to her as well. But I'm going to instruct the witness to answer the question. So bring the jury back in. Mr. Hood, you can ask your question, sir.
Okay, Dr. Brady, let me ask my question again. I want you to assume the following facts to be true. You gain knowledge somehow that the variant of unknown or uncertain significance that we have been discussing the past few moments changes from unknown significance to pathogenic at some point in the future. Does that change your opinion about this case?
No, because this variant won't change.
Okay. And you can say that with absolute certainty?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. That's all I have, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Hood. Ms. Bernard, do you have questions?
Good afternoon, Dr. Brown.
Good afternoon.
Okay. How long have you been working at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta?
Approximately 9 years.
Okay. And were you working at any other hospitals before that?
Yes, Vanderbilt Children's Hospital.
Okay. And that was where you began working after you completed your residency and fellowships?
Yes.
And in the course of working at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, as I believe has previously been discussed, you do have significant interactions with the Department of Family and Children's Services, correct?
Yes, we do.
And you mentioned that you have a number of DFACS liaisons who you work with at the hospital.
Yes, there are 4.
Okay. What kind of contact do you find yourself having with these DFACS liaisons in the typical case?
In a typical case, they will come and be with us. The purpose is because a lot of times by the time we are called, DFACS has already been called either from the emergency department or from another hospital. So they are there to help answer any questions to the parents that the parents might have. This is true for both cases that are deemed abuse, versus cases that are deemed accidental. Because a lot of times, even in cases that are deemed accidental, defects has already been called from somewhere else, and the parents are, distraught about that. So our defects liaisons can help through that process to make sure the parents know that we're calling it an accident and they don't have to worry about it.
Do they have any other roles beyond speaking to parents and conveying information regarding diagnoses that you and your colleagues may have made?
They help coordinate meetings. They help, one of the liaisons doesn't do consults as much with us. She takes care of like more ongoing cases, chronic children, things of that nature, and those kinds of placements. Various administrative stuff within DFACS, roles that I don't know what they do within DFACS.
So does the DFACS liaison contact you in regard to a particular case, or do you contact the DFACS liaison?
The consult comes from the hospital, and then I'll contact the DFACS liaison and let them know that we have a case to see.
So in this instance of the case with Jamison Timms, at what point did you receive the consult for Jamison Timms?
Sometime on the 14th.
Okay,
I don't remember what time.
do you know approximately what time?
In the morning, but I don't remember what time.
Okay. And if the skeletal survey was completed after 10 o'clock, would you agree that, did you get the consult before or after the skeletal survey had been completed?
I honestly don't remember. The only thing I can tell you for a fact is that by the time I saw Jamison, the skeletal survey was done.
But by the time that you saw Jamison, you had already pretty much decided this was a child abuse case, right?
No.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about what you had concluded at that point.
Well, we knew that he had fractures, and we knew that he had the injury to his mouth, and I didn't really know what the face was going to look like. The thing is, you really don't know what you're going to get when you walk into the room. Sometimes parents have weird things that happened, very interesting accidents that happen. Sometimes we do find medical conditions that look like abuse to people that are not trained. And so it's very important that when we walk into a room, we walk fresh. Now, I knew that there was serious concerns because of previous conversations that I had mentioned. But you have to walk in there with fresh eyes. And this is one of the reasons that even though a case might look like it's abuse because the other conditions are rare, we still do the testing.
Okay. How many times did you meet with Jamison Timms and his mother and father, Carrie and Brady Timms?
His mom and dad, that one time.
Okay. So if I'm understanding this correctly, on the morning of January 14th, you received information about the case, went to meet with Jamison and Carrie and Brady, and then approximately 2 hours later was when they were escorted out of the hospital and custody had been seized of Jamison, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But you had not made up your mind that it was a child abuse situation prior to that conversation?
That's right. The thing about it is, even though we do have a DFACS liaison, it is not our job to do the investigation or make decisions on custody. Now, we can say to DFACS, we're concerned about abuse. There are these tests pending, but these conditions are rare because, abuse happens 600,000 times a year. OI is 1 out of 50,000. Ehlers-Danlos is 1 out of 10,000, right? So child abuse is way, 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 way more frequent than these other entities. And you have parents with a history that really don't speak to genetic disorders in a healthy baby, right? So what we have to say to DFACS is, we have a baby with these injuries. I have really high concerns, but we're doing these tests. At that point, it's not my decision what they're going to do. Now, do I say, I think this baby needs to be in a safe environment? Yes. But that can mean different things at different counties of DFACS. That could be, having somebody in the home, like a grandparent, while the parents are still there. That could, in certain cases, that can mean removal. That's the extreme. That's not my decision.
So what is your decision then? What was the decision-making role that you had in the case of Jamison Thames?
Medical is to look at the case and say, am I concerned for child abuse or not?
And when did you make the determination that you were concerned about child abuse?
I was concerned right away after talking to them and looking at the injuries.
Okay.
Now, is there a possibility that something else could have happened? That's why we did the test. Was that possibility very small? Yes, it was very small.
Well, but I believe we just established that the decision to remove Jamison was made well before any of the tests had even been sent off. So it is certainly, you obviously made the determination that you believed it to be a medical diagnosis of child abuse well before the test results were sent off, right?
So if you look at my original preliminary note, because there's two notes in the chart. There's a preliminary note that's very short, and then there's my final consultation note. The preliminary note, the wording that I said, I believe, was, at this time, this case is most consistent with child physical abuse. It was only 4 days later that I signed my official note, and that we had at least all the bleeding lab work and at least all of the bony labs, calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, PTH, right? We didn't have OI yet, but again, OI is very rare. When you look at mandated reporting laws, by law, I am mandated to report when I'm concerned about abuse, period. In fact, I was actually another one that had called DFACS, right? It was his PCP, because she was concerned about abuse in this case. And so for me, rendering the opinion that, yes, I'm very concerned about abuse was going to be important as a mandated reporter. And in these cases, because child abuse is so much more frequent than these illnesses, DFACS, Georgia, has to make a decision about what they're going to do. Do they wait the 2 months for the results to come back without the child being in any kind of protection in a situation that potentially is dangerous if the child is being truly abused? Or do they put some sort of contingency plan in? Generally, they're going to do something kind of a contingency plan, because 2 months is a long time. We do see babies come back all the time with more injuries. Sometimes we see babies come back dead. And that's very problematic. Now, it's going to be dependent on the county what they're going to do. Like I said, sometimes they put safety placements like a grandparent or a friend in the home. Sometimes they remove the child, and that's not CHOA to decide.
Let me interrupt you right there. Was there a question, Ms. Bernard? Is this in response to a question?
I believe so, but I'll certainly move along to the next one, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay. I am trying to pin down exactly when you conveyed to anyone from DFACS that you believed this was a case of child abuse.
So we did have a conversation. I don't know when we had that conversation. It was certainly not 2 hours later.
Okay. So was it prior to the 2 hours later, prior to the parents being escorted out of the hospital while y'all kept the baby?
No.
So let me see if I can understand this. Prior to Jamison being kept by DFACS in Children's Hospital of Atlanta, you had not made the determination that there was child abuse?
So I think this is where it's confusing.
I'm definitely confused.
You're right. That's what I'm trying to explain. So I make the medical determination. It is child physical abuse is a medical diagnosis in the ICD-10. It is not a social diagnosis. Okay. The DFACS and all of that stuff is a separate entity for me. Yes, we have a DFACS liaison because our cases obviously intertwine. By the time I see Jameson, DFACS had already been called by his primary care physician. Wheels had already been turning, right? I believe actually that DFACS had already been in the hospital with police maybe the night before on the 13th, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong on that. You'd have to check the record. But that train had been moving. So yes, at some point I had talked to DFACS, but it was after the fact.
Okay, well, and thank you, and I appreciate that analogy of the train moving. And so what I suppose I'm trying to figure out is what your role was on this train. And you mentioned child physical abuse is a medical diagnosis. At what point did you make that medical diagnosis of Jamison Timms?
My official diagnosis was made on the 18th when I signed my final note.
Okay. So up until January 18th, you had not made a medical diagnosis of child abuse of Jamison Timms.
Not officially. Now, I had very high concerns.
Okay, so let's talk about what not officially means. Does that mean you were just telling other people in the hospital, this baby is being abused, you'd better take him away from the parents?
No. We say we have high concerns for abuse. We still have some lab work pending for bleeding stuff.
Okay, so let me understand. So you were saying we have high concerns for abuse, but that is not a medical diagnosis. At what point did you say we have high concerns of abuse?
The high concerns for abuse were after I talked to him, or talked to the parents right away. My official consultation that was signed that said, yes, this is what we believe it is, was signed on the 18th.
Okay. So who did you communicate to regarding your high concerns of abuse?
Typically, we will speak to the hospital social worker, and of course, the liaison that is there with us. Hospital social work and the liaison will speak to DFACS and law enforcement and keep updated on, the condition of the child and what's happening at the bedside.
Okay. So did you communicate your high concerns of abuse to social worker Jody Ann Mossolo?
Yes.
Okay. Were there any other social workers you communicated that concern to?
I think it was just Jody, but I don't remember.
Okay. And you communicated this to DFACS liaison, was it Heather Gates?
So, no, the DFACS liaison is Ann Ray, but she was in the room with me. She was the one that did the consult with me.
Okay. So you communicated your high concerns for abuse to Jody Ann Mossolo, to Ann Ray. Who else did you communicate them to?
At some point, and again, I don't remember when this meeting was, we had a meeting with DFACS.
Who from DFACS?
I believe you mentioned Heather. Law enforcement, so detective, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the names of who was on the phone call. Hospital social worker, so Jody was on that phone call. Dr. Fleming, the bedside nurse, and we discussed the case with them. And at that point, mentioned all the injuries, mentioned the lab work, and discussed at that point that we believed that this was abuse. Also mentioned that, yes, OI tests were still pending.
Okay. But that did not constitute a medical diagnosis of child abuse, is your testimony today?
That's not my testimony. This was definitely a medical diagnosis of child abuse. When the problem is I don't remember when I spoke to them at that meeting. I don't have that date in my head.
So you're saying you don't recall when this conference call took place with multiple members of DFACS Detective Jody Faulkner from Gordon County, an attending nurse. Anyone else?
Not an attending nurse, the attending physician, Dr. Fleming.
Okay, it was the attending physician. What about, was it Katie Cloud Johnson, perhaps the RN who participated in this?
Could be.
Okay, so that's at least 3 medical care providers,
Yes.
at least 2 DFACS folks,
Yes.
1 law enforcement.
Yes.
And do you recall if this conversation took place prior to your meeting with Brady and Carrie Timms and Jamison Timms?
It did not occur prior, no.
Okay, so it occurred after your meeting with,
Yes.
okay. Did it occur after they had been removed from the hospital?
Yes.
Okay. So y'all really didn't even have a conference about this before you took their baby and kicked them out of the hospital?
So again, we don't take their baby. We're a hospital. It is not our decision to do that. We have no power to do that at all. In fact, we would get in a lot of trouble if we did any kind of that. So there's laws against that. That is a decision for DFACS to do about what kind of placement, what kind of safety implementation they're going to do. And as I mentioned, I believe that Dr. Harbin had called DFACS on the 12th. By the time I'm seeing him, it's the 14th. There's been 2 days for DFACS to figure things out of what they need to do.
So did you ever meet April Hunt from DFACS?
Maybe. I'm really terrible with names.
31-year employee of DFACS in Gordon County, did a home visit with Brady and Carrie Timms and Jamison Timms on January 12th, 2021.
Again, I'm really terrible with names. Better with faces.
Well, so we're talking about the case of Jamison Timms.
Yes, of course.
So do you recall ever speaking with anyone from DFACS who had conducted a home visit with Brady and Carrie Timms and Jamison Timms and observed them feeding, interacting with, observed the home environment, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay, so you do remember speaking with April Hunt?
I mean, I don't remember her name, but I definitely remember speaking with somebody that went to their home and observed those things, yes.
Okay, do you remember approximately when that conversation took place?
I don't.
Okay, was it before or after Brady and Carrie Timms had been removed from the hospital?
After. All the conversations that happened after my consultation with them and then after they had been removed.
All right. Did you ever, in the course of your consultation with and analysis of Jamison Timms, have a DEXA scan performed in order to test for any bone density issues?
No, he was too young. We can't do that before the age of 6 months.
Okay.
There's no standards.
Did you ever become aware of the results of any subsequent DEXA scans performed on Jamison Timms?
I believe that they were normal.
Okay. And when were those performed that you believe were normal?
I believe that they were done when he was 6 or 7 months.
Okay. So you have stayed engaged on Jamison Timms' case, is that fair to say?
The last time I saw him was at 8 months, but I did review records for preparation for court.
Now, were you responsible for any of the notations in Jamison's medical records from CHOA regarding the attitude of the parents and caregivers at the bedside?
Generally, I might note that in my medical record, my note.
Okay, so would you have noted that they were attentive and engaged?
Yes, they were very attentive and seemed caring.
Would you have noted that they were grateful and compliant?
Yes.
Okay. Was there anything about anything they said to you or the manner in which they were conducting themselves that gave you a specific concern about child abuse?
It wasn't that it was, I mean, obviously the injuries were concerning, and that is the most objective thing that we can have, is what are the injuries showing, and are there any histories that are being given to us that are accidental or medical that would have them cause that, and there were none. But as far as behaviors are concerned, the thing that stood out to me, and it wasn't a concerning behavior per se, but it actually pulled at my heartstrings more than anything. And my heart went out to Miss Timms, was when she was talking about her own history of her childhood. And how stressful this situation probably was for her. And then, of course, her postpartum depression.
So did that give you a concern that she was a child abuser?
Well, the thing about it is we can't rule anybody out. It's not my job as a child abuse pediatrician to make that decision. My job as a child abuse pediatrician is to look at the injuries and what we have, and are there mechanisms or medical reasons that that child would have the injury? Who did it? I don't know. I can't decide that. That's for investigators to decide. That's for police to decide. I can't say. And I try very hard to not make those decisions. Now, the problem is, we have to say we need to have this baby in a safe environment. But that's going to always be the case in any case that we see that we're concerned about abuse.
So is it fair to say, as you have answered my previous questions, that it was the injuries that were most relevant to you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So was there anything these parents could have said in their meeting with you that would have prevented them from being removed from the hospital 2 hours later while y'all kept the baby?
Again, it's not our decision about what DFACS is going to do. We see DFACS make many different plans as far as safety is concerned. Nothing would have changed as far as, let me back up. If one of them had given me a significant medical history that would have indicated that they had brittle bone disease in their family, or they had other genetic components, or they had major bleeding disorders or anything like that, yes, I would have definitely said indeterminate, because we call a lot of cases indeterminate. And actually, our team picks up a lot of bleeding disorders, and we pick up a decent amount of OI before the geneticists do, because that's kind of our job, to make sure that we do that screening. And it's actually one of my favorite parts of the job, is when I can pick up something that's a little bit different. So, yeah, absolutely. If they had been able to tell me, we had a weird fall down the stairs, or, oh my gosh, all my life I've broken every bone in my body just, standing there, of course those things would have changed. But as it was, there was nothing in what they explained, unfortunately, that led me to a different conclusion.
Okay. And so you were seeing them on the morning after they had spent the night unexpectedly in the hospital because y'all had admitted Jameson the day before, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you've got parents who are sleeping in the hospital room with their child.
Yes.
Okay. Y'all have already, I believe, noted in the record that parents are not to be given information about what's going on with the child, right? We can talk to the DFACS liaison about that, but.
It's not in my note, so you'd have to tell me exactly where you read that, because I can't quote other people's notes.
Okay. So if they had been able to provide you with more information about a family history of fractures and back pain at that point, that would have changed the outcome?
If they would have been able to provide histories that are pertinent to disorders that cause fractures, yes. I will say that the only thing about that I would still have been very, very concerned, and so I might need to take that back. We still have that injury to the bottom of his mouth. And that is still something that's going to require force, that he's not going to be able to do that by himself. Like, if he has OI, which is a brittle bone disease, that's not going to cause a tear to your mouth. Ehlers-Danlos, right? The hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos, sure, except that, again, in infants, it's not symptomatic. You really have to hit puberty to show symptoms. I'll refrain from quoting literature because I'm not supposed to, so I'll leave it at that. But you have to have force for that. So there's nothing that would have changed that particular sentinel injury. So I think that given that particular injury with no explanation, I still would have at least called it concerning, but perhaps not most consistent with.
Okay. And you brought up the issue of the injury to the bottom of Jameson's mouth. I believe you previously testified that anytime you see a mark on an infant that you are doing a consult with, you take a photograph of it, right?
Yes.
Why did you not take a photograph of Jameson's mouth on January 14th?
Yeah, so that's a very difficult place to photograph. I just wasn't able to get a good one.
Okay. And the note that was made in the medical records when Jameson was admitted on January 13th was that frenulum appears intact at this time, right?
Yes, yes.
Did that give you any cause to question the information that was provided to you by the primary care provider who had initially made this report?
No, because if you look at it, the tear injury, whatever you want to call it, it is sitting right next to the frenulum. So I can see where, when you're looking at that injury, yes, the frenulum is still intact, but it is adjacent to the frenulum. So it's leaving the frenulum intact, but it's still impacting the frenulum.
Okay. But again, it just not able to take a photograph of it?
No.
Now, what is the significance of the abnormal lipase finding on Jameson's lab results?
It was low, so no significance. We worry about it when it's high.
Okay. Why is low not an issue?
We have low lipase all the time. Sometimes it's the way that the test is run, the way that it's picked up, the way that it's run through the machine.
And lipase, you are of course the medical expert, but it has to do with blood and blood clotting, right?
Lipase is more to do with intestinal issues.
Okay.
Typically pancreas.
Does it have anything to do with blood metabolites?
A little bit,
Okay.
but we mostly think pancreas when we think lipase.
So when And you weren't able to compare any of these results to the labs from Erlanger, right? Because they were lost?
So Erlanger had some labs. So no, not all of them, because they did lose some of them, but they were able to do a CBC, which is your basic, hemoglobin, like your basic blood, like when you go to your doctor, they'll do a CBC. And they were able to do your coags, which are your basic clotting factors, and they were able to do the factor 8, which is the main one for hemophilia, and they were able to do factor 9. That's the one that we talked about that's a little bit low in newborns. They lost some of the other ones like von Willebrand and things like that, which was unfortunate. So no, we couldn't compare those, but those other main ones we were able to. And in addition to that, there was a Dr. McManus at Erlanger that reviewed the lab work with Dr. Garcia. I think there was a note from December 7th in that record that said everything was normal there as well. But that's why I wanted to do them again at CHOA, because then we could add the von Willebrand and some of the other things that we needed.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to turn back to DFACS a little bit, since you have obviously worked with them fairly extensively. Are you familiar with the new protocol that has been put into place as of February 14th, 2025 regarding medical diagnoses of child abuse?
I am.
Okay, and how are you familiar with it?
So our legal department is still reviewing it at this time, so that's as much as I know about it.
Okay, so have you been asked to sign a medical attestation statement yet on any of the cases on which you have served as a child abuse pediatrician?
Not yet.
Okay, and the attestation statement in the protocol asks that I, physician's full name, attest that I have thoroughly reviewed the medical history of the patient's name, including but not limited to past medical and surgical history, previous diagnoses and treatments, medication history and allergies, laboratory and imaging results, specialist and consultant reports, and hospitalization and procedure records. I confirm that I have considered this information in my medical decision-making and diagnosis for the patient. So that you have not signed that attestation on any cases so far?
Correct.
Right. Would you have been able to sign it for Jamison Timms on January 14th, 2022?
I object on relevance. That didn't even exist to February of 2025. So if it's still reviewed by the legal department, they're not signing them today. I object to the form of the question. It's not relevant for this case. It couldn't have been signed.
And I was asking her as a hypothetical if she would have been able to sign it on January 14th of 2022, the time at which Jamison Timms was removed from his parents based on a medical diagnosis of child abuse.
I'll overrule the objection. I'll let you ask in the form of a hypothetical. You've prefaced your question with the fact that this did not come into effect till February of 2025. So.
Of course, Your Honor, we do want to be candid with the jury about that. So would you have been able to sign that attestation statement on January 14th, 2022 as to Jamison Timms?
No, but one of the problems is that, on most patients, it would be really hard to sign that attestation because we generally, we can't know whether or not we have all the medical records sometimes.
Wouldn't that be important to know if you have all of the medical records to review in a particular case?
The thing is that you can't prove a negative, and so when you are relying on other people to send you things, it is impossible to know if the other parties are being responsible and sending you everything that they have.
Okay. Well, do you not feel like you can rely on other medical professionals to provide you with all of the information that would be relevant to making a determination in a case like Jamison Timms?
The thing is, it's not just medical professionals, right? It's medical staff. Sometimes it's going to be DFACS. Sometimes it's going to be, other hospitals. You don't know where medical records are coming from. And so when you're signing a legal document saying that you've reviewed everything and you're just not sure where your sources are from, it's really difficult to say that you know that for certain. You can't control what other people are sending you, so that's tricky.
Okay. Is it more difficult than making a determination that a child's medical condition is so bad that he must be removed from his parents?
Ask that question again, because I'm not sure that is something that I can answer since I'm not DFACS. So I want to make sure that I would be answering the correct question.
Well, and I certainly understand your and DFAC's concern about having legal review everything, and that I suppose there are people who would be concerned that having to sign off on a medical attestation form assuring and attesting that you have reviewed all of the available medical information about a child. What I'm asking is if that is more difficult than actually reviewing those documents and making a determination about the child that can result in a 3-month-old infant being taken away from his parents.
I would say that it is easier to review the medical records available, which is something that I did. Erlanger in Epic, Epic is our medical system. I was able to review his birth records. I was able to review his hospital records from his Erlanger visit. And, he was only 3 months old at the time, so thankfully there wasn't a ton to review.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for bringing that up. So you were able to review all of the records from Advent Health before making your diagnosis of Jameson-Tens, right?
I was able to, Advent Health is his birth hospital, yes.
Okay. So you reviewed the final diagnosis regarding the dense subchorionic fibrin deposition with villus fibrosis and hypoplasia, increased syncytial giant cells consistent with Tenney-Parker change because of maternal hypertension.
Is
You
that
reviewed
from mother's records?
It's the records related to the delivery of Jameson-Tens.
Okay, so because that's mother's records and mother's not my patient, I can't review those records. I could only read Jameson's records.
Okay, so you're saying that the records from the OB/GYN who delivered Jameson would not have been a part of your review?
That's right, because those are mom's records. Mom's not my patient, so because of HIPAA, I can't see those records unless mom would, allow me to.
Okay. All right, and if I could, going back to the question of the pre-notification, are you involved in making that determination of when the parents can be given or denied access to information about their child once their child is admitted to Children's Hospital?
No.
Okay. And when I asked you about that earlier, you asked if I could reference the particular part of the record. Your Honor, if I may approach the witness?
Certainly.
And I'm just.
So what's the question?
Just if, and I think you already answered that you are not a part of the decision to deny medical information to the parents?
That's correct.
Okay. Who is responsible for that determination of when the parents are to be denied medical information about their child?
DFACS. The hospital has absolutely no right to do any of that.
Okay. but the hospital will carry out the decision of DFACS.
We have to, by law.
Okay. Well, I understand you have to by law if you've got an order from a judge, that DFACS has gone to a judge and gotten an order, right?
Yes, and I believe we also have safety plans and paperwork from DFACS that they send to us as well.
Okay. Well, so I guess what I'm asking is, does this mean that there was a judge who signed off on an order to deny medical information to the parents of Jamison Timms, or just someone who works for DFACS at the hospital made that determination?
That would be a good question for DFACS.
Okay.
Today is Monday. It is March the 24th of 2025, and we are back today with our case that we've been trying, the state of Georgia versus Brady Timms and Carrie Timms, case number 24-35261. Before we get started today and get the, ladies and gentlemen, the jury brought back in, I have a couple of housekeeping matters I need to go over with. I'm going to say this for purposes of the record. This court received an application pursuant to Rule 22 prior to the trial, to the start of the trial of this case. The court approved that application and provided copies of that signed Rule 22 to counsel for both sides. No written objections were filed to that Rule 22 by either side. There was an oral objection made in court by the state. It was concurred with, I guess, for lack of a better word, by counsel for defendant Brady Timms, and counsel for defendant Carrie Timms just took no position concerning the filming, the audio and video recording of the child witness. And that was discussed and addressed at that time. And Mr. Kicker, who was the applicant, complied with that request. My understanding is that numerous witnesses, through private counsel, not counsel in this courtroom, through private counsel, have made objections, not objections, because that's, to me, a legal word. They've complained about the filming of their clients. Again, no written objections were filed with this court. We had previous meetings about Rule 22. We had representatives from the requestor of Rule 22. They came to pretrial proceedings. They met with Gordon County's IT staff prior to the start of the trial. They've complied with every request that the court has made. There have been no violations of that rule pursuant to the application. I want that noted on the record. Dr. Brown, if you would step back around to the witness stand. And Dr. Brown, you took the witness oath when we were last here, but just out of abundance of caution, since so many days have passed, if you'll raise your right hand again, please. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give before this court in the matter now pending will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat. And when we stopped on Wednesday, I think Mr. Hood had completed his cross-examination. Ms. Bernard, you were ready to begin with yours.
And I had already begun.
Well, or continue, let me rephrase it, yes. Continuing with yours.
Hopefully we will not take up too much time. Good morning, Dr. Brown.
Good morning.
And picking up where we left off about a week and a half ago, I did bring home a copy of the records. Your Honor, if I could approach the
Certainly, Ms. Bernard.
I'm going to have some questions about these records, so.
Sure.
So when we left off about a week and a half ago, we were talking about some of the medical records of Jamison Timms at CHOA. But I did want to ask a few questions about your role regarding Jamison's care. Were you his treating physician?
No, I was a consulting physician.
Okay, and can you tell me, so what is the role of a consulting physician with regard to diagnosis and care for Jamison Thames?
Sure, in any patient. So you have the treating team, they're the ones that they are admitting the patient to the floor, they're the ones that take daily care of the patient. A consulting team, and that can be, the child abuse team, that could be any kind of team, is the one that is tangentially taking care of the patient. They come in for a very specific reason.
Okay, so who was responsible for the treatment and care of Jamison Thames from a physician perspective when he arrived with his parents at Children's Hospital of Atlanta?
So he was admitted to the hospitalist team. I believe the attending was Dr. Zanaya Fleming.
Okay.
At least she was one of them at the time.
Okay, so would Dr. Fleming then, would she be the one kind of responsible for all of Jamison's care and treatment and diagnosis?
So she would be the one taking care of the daily ins and outs of Jamison's care and coordinating all the different consulting teams.
So if there are questions about kind of his overall care and treatment, that would you know all of those as the consulting physician, or might there be information that you do not have about Jamison Thames?
So the big picture questions, I would probably know those things, but like the little things as far as, maybe, for example, how much did he have wet diapers overnight? Those little details I might not know.
Okay. Well, just in terms of, recommended care and diagnoses, is that something that you would be responsible for as a consulting physician, or would that be something Dr. Fleming or somebody else was responsible for?
It depends. So specifically, I would be responsible for anything pertaining to injury care, recommendations that we made as a team, any lab work that we would have recommended. But not necessarily if there is other consulting teams that recommended other things.
Okay. Were there any other consulting teams working on Jamison Thames' case?
Other than radiology that had seen him,
Well, in
I don't believe
radiology-
so. And they had come through radiology, but no, they were not, taking care of him, no.
And radiology, Dr. Dixon, she never actually met and looked at Jamison Thames, right?
Correct, just his films.
And you, the first time you met with and looked at Jamison Thames was the afternoon of January 14th, right?
That's right.
Okay. But that is not when you started working on the case, right? You started working on Jamison Thames' case earlier on January 13th, correct?
That's when I heard about him from Dr. Carla Garcia, that's right.
Okay, and so when you say you heard about him, is that you were brought in to be a consulting physician on his team, or what do you mean by that?
So, as I had mentioned before, Dr. Garcia had given me a call because I was the on-call physician on the 13th as well. I was not sure on the 13th whether I was going to be the attending physician or the attending consultant physician for Jamison Thames when he arrived, because I wasn't sure when he was going to arrive. So had he come in on a different day, it could have been one of my partners.
Okay, but, so you started working on the case when Dr. Garcia called you on January 13th, right?
I guess clarify, what do you mean by working on the case?
And that's what I'm, hoping to clarify with you and the ladies and gentlemen of the jury is, we've got Brady and Carrie Timms who are told, take your child to Children's Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to figure out who is responsible for diagnosing and treating Jamison Thames.
Okay, so I was the one that when he arrived to CHOA, I was also the one that saw him as the child abuse pediatrician. So I was the consultant that ultimately diagnosed him as being a victim of child abuse.
Okay, but you didn't do that until January 18th, right?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm hoping we can talk about today is your actions and the actions of other physicians and staff at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta on January 13th, 14th, and 15th.
Okay.
So when you say you began working on the case, when did you begin working on, when would you characterize it as, I began working on the case of Jamison Timms?
So I would say that I actually began on the 14th.
Okay. So this is probably a good time for us to go through Jamison's medical records. So I've got you a copy over there as well. And so if we can start on page 1, does this look familiar to you as a copy of medical records produced by Children's Healthcare of Atlanta where you work?
Yes, it does.
Okay, and so on the very first page, on the admissions, on January 13th, 2022, we've got a diagnosis of suspected child physical abuse, right?
Yes.
Did you have anything to do with that diagnosis being entered into the chart on January 13th, 2022?
No.
Okay, so you had nothing to do with that?
No, he came through the ED and they have to put in a diagnosis, and oftentimes that's one of the things that the ED will have to do. Now, if this was put in on the 13th, then no, because I would not have put in this diagnosis on the 13th. But I actually don't see a date of when this was put in.
Okay. And then under final diagnoses.
Oh, you know what, actually, so, and to correct, if this is put in on the 15th, yeah, no, never mind, I actually don't see when the date was put in on this.
Okay. And then so under final diagnoses, and this is under discharge date and time of January 15th, 2022 at 12:43 p.m., right?
Yes.
So under final diagnoses, child physical abuse suspected.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've also got family history of diseases of the blood and blood-forming organs and certain disorders involving the immune mechanism.
Yes, I see that.
Okay. Were you responsible for making that diagnosis about a family history of diseases involving the blood and blood-forming organs?
No,
Okay, do you know who was responsible for that?
no.
Okay. All right. So if we can go down to, over to page 3. And this is under admissions information that is reviewed on January 13th, 2022 at 10:40 p.m., right?
Where do you see that? Oh, yep.
At the top
Okay.
right corner?
Yes, I see that.
Okay, and so you've got a problem list that includes closed fracture of multiple ribs of left side with routine healing and non-accidental traumatic injury to child, right?
That's right.
And this is dated January 14th, 2022, and reviewed January 13th, 2022. Is that, I'm asking you if this is a correct statement of what is present in the CHOA medical records for Jamison Timms?
That's what I see, yes.
Okay, so who made that diagnosis on either January 13th or 14th?
I mean, according to this, and I'm just reading from the record, it says, entered by Zanaya Fleming.
Okay, so is that something that you would have consulted with Dr. Fleming on?
We would have spoken.
Okay, but your testimony is still, you did not make a diagnosis of non-accidental traumatic injury to a child until January 18th?
That was my final diagnosis on the 18th.
Okay, but I just want to check. You're still telling us that you did not make this diagnosis on January 13th or January 14th?
Well, as I've actually said before, if you look at my preliminary note, it does say on my preliminary note that this was most consistent with. So clearly on the 14th, I was extremely concerned about and thought that this was most consistent with abuse. My final diagnosis of diagnostic with abuse was on the 18th.
Okay, well, so I guess what does it mean to make a diagnosis?
This is what you're saying that the condition is.
Okay, and so when So you're being offered as an expert witness by the state for the conclusion that Jamison Timms was a victim of child abuse, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so your expertise is as a pediatrician, as a medical doctor, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you please clearly tell us when you made this diagnosis?
All right. So when Jameson came in and I saw him on the 14th, as I previously mentioned, by the time that we had finished talking, we had ruled out most things from the historical perspective. My conclusion was that everything was most consistent with child physical abuse.
So would you say you made the diagnosis on January 14th?
I would say that by January 14th, I was, 99% sure that this was what it was, yes. By the 18th, I was able to definitively sign my final note and call it diagnostic.
Okay. And then if we can move over to page 8, please. And then at the bottom of the page, reason for, under health history on January 13th, reason for hospitalization, evaluation for non-accidental trauma. Was that something that you had anything to do with putting into the record?
Where do you see that?
It's at the bottom of page 8, under row name, reason for hospitalization.
This is page 13, you said?
I'm sorry, it's page 8.
Page 8, I'm sorry.
It's okay, I got a lot of stickers in there to mark all the pages.
I did not enter this, no.
Okay. And did you have anything to do with entering it?
I had nothing to do with entering it.
Okay. All right, and if we could move over to page 10. At the bottom of the page, does it reflect blood pressure out of range for Jamison Timms?
You said page 10?
Yes. And it should be the next sticker if that's easier to get to.
Okay, blood pressure out of range. Now where come here? He was crying with vitals. Oh, here we are at the end. Yes, I see that.
Okay. And so was that finding something that you were aware of and took into consideration in your diagnosis and treatment of Jamison Timms?
No, he was crying at the time, so it makes sense that his blood pressure would have been out of range.
Okay. All right, if we could move over to page 12, please. And about midway down the page, under parent caregiver involvement, is there a note from 11:22 p.m. on January 13th, parent caregiver at bedside, attentive, engaged?
You said page 12?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And that was also your observation the next day when you came and met with Jamison Timms and his parents for the first and only time. You also observed them both to be at the bedside and attentive and engaged, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Now, if you could, our next sticker is at page 24. And at the bottom of the page, under referral data from January 13th, alleged physical abuse, child protection. Did you have any involvement in placing this referral reason into Jamison Timms' medical record?
So I did not place this in the medical record, but when we found out about Jamison through Dr. Garcia, one of the things that we do is call the transfer center and let them know a child is coming. And so when we let them know a child is coming, we do let them know what the child is coming in for, which is for possible injuries.
Okay. So the answer is you had something to do with the transmission of that information that ended up in the record there?
Yes.
Thank you. And if we could go to the next page, page 25, also down at the bottom of the page, under DFAC's legal involvement on Thursday, January 13th, 2022, type of abuse, physical abuse. Were you involved in placing that into the record?
No.
All right, on the next page, page 26, which continues to discuss DFACs and law enforcement involvement. It notes name and relationship of person notified, parents already aware on January 13th.
I have this on the bottom of page 25.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're moving over also under DFACs, law enforcement involvement on page 26. Name and relationship of person notified, parents already aware.
Oh, here, yes, okay.
Okay.
I see that.
What is this saying that parents were aware of?
So looking at this flow sheet, so by the way, this is not information that I put in, so
Okay.
I have to decipher it also myself.
Well, if it's
So-
not information that you put in or had anything to do with, then I will ask another witness about it.
Yeah.
But I did want to check. So was that something that you were aware of or know
No.
what it means in this context?
This is not information that I put in. But, this is, it looks like it's information about the defects case number and the detective it was assigned to and things like that.
Okay. All right, and then on page 27, I believe we asked about this last Wednesday, a week and a half ago, and I appreciate the patience of the ladies and gentlemen of the jury. But there's the trauma eval, no pre-notification noted on here. Is that right?
I see that. So what's the question?
Did you have anything to do with this determination that the parents were not to be notified of any of the care, treatment, and diagnosis of their son, Jamison Timms?
No.
You were, okay. All right. Page 30. About 2/3 of the way down the page. Do you note the record from January 13th, 2022 at 7:10 PM? Frenulum appears intact at this time.
Yes.
Did you have anything to do with putting that notation into the record?
No.
And you did not take a photograph when you looked at Jamison's frenulum the next day, January 14th, did you?
That's correct.
All right, and moving over to page 31, about 1/3 of the way down under the skin flow sheet, there's a mention of the scratch to Jamison's right cheek, correct?
Page 31. I'm sorry. Oh, yep, here it is. Yes.
And so that reflects an image added to the chart of the scratch, right?
Yes.
Okay, but we don't have any images of the frenulum that was just designated as intact the day before, right?
We don't have a photograph. There was a diagram that was put in by the ED physician, if I remember correctly, from the medical record, a body diagram by Dr. Melnikoff.
Okay.
It's not depicted in the pages that you see here. It's in his note.
I think that's coming up a little bit later in here. So page 40, about halfway down, guardian informed to notify staff member prior to leaving child unaccompanied for any reason, Thursday, January 13th. Were you involved in that decision-making or placing that into Jamison's medical record?
No.
All right, page 42, at the top of the page, transport at discharge, friend, family transportation on January 14th, 10 a.m. were you involved in placing any of that into the record?
No.
All right. On page 43, in the middle, blood pressure exceptions. We've got another blood pressure out of range on January 14th at 4:48 a.m. for Jameson. Were you involved in placing that into the record, and did you consider it in your diagnoses and treatment of Jameson?
I was not putting it into the record, and no.
All right, on page 46, under patient family shift goal, on January 14th, 2022, 8:11 a.m., assess need for safety plan. Is that something you were involved in placing into the record?
No.
All right, on page 53, we've got patient flow sheet data about halfway down, frequent interventions, and we've got an entire row that says no additional interventions 4 times. Is that right?
Where do you, sorry, it's just so many rows, so I'm going to make sure I'm looking at the right one. Page 53.
It's kind of in the middle of page 53, frequent interventions.
I see, okay.
And then we've got a row of no additional interventions
I see
at
that.
4:48 a.m. on January 14th, no additional interventions at 8:11 a.m., none at 3:57 p.m. on January 14th, and none at 4:23 p.m. on January 14th, right?
I see them. Mhm.
Okay. And so were you involved in placing any of that into the record?
No.
Okay. As the consulting physician making diagnoses, would you have been responsible for interventions such as, we suspect a compression fracture, let's place this child in an immobilization collar so that we can do further testing to see if any damage has been done?
No. That would have come before me when they did the x-rays.
Okay. But you did review the x-rays, right?
That's right.
Okay. And would you agree that recommended procedure, if there is a compression fracture, is to, especially in the spine, would be to immobilize the individual so that further injury would not occur?
It depends where the compression fracture is. Typically neurosurgery or orthopedics would take a look at that and see what's needed.
Okay. So did neurosurgery or orthopedics take a look at Jameson and say that no additional interventions were needed?
I would have to review the records to make sure that I would refresh my memory to see what they said.
Okay. Do you recall the names of any of the orthopedic or neurosurgery consults who might have participated in Jameson Tim's treatment and diagnoses?
I would have to review the record at this time, but I'm happy to do it.
Actually, yes, if you would not mind.
Yeah. Sometimes it's done in the emergency department as well. So it does seem that he was evaluated from that standpoint in the emergency department, by the emergency department. Given that his was in the lower thoracic and that he seemed to be doing well, typically, the C-collar is just going to be immobilizing the neck. It makes sense that if he was okay, that they wouldn't have necessarily done anything different.
Did I hear
This
that
one-
correctly? It makes sense that if he was okay, you wouldn't need to do any additional interventions?
For a T10, that's right, because it wasn't C-spine. So you wouldn't have to immobilize the neck then. So it appears that it was, like I said, done through the emergency department, that he was evaluated then.
So were you able to find any indications that you had referred the case over to neurosurgery or orthopedics for additional interventions or diagnoses? Or
Oh,
treatment?
no, and I never implied that I would have. That's really not typically my role. So, as I mentioned before, my role is really to look at mechanism of injury. When the children come in and they've already had a skeletal survey and injury is already found, typically the admitting team or ED, if there is an intervention that's needed on a fracture, like any kind of casting, any kind of immobilization, it's going to be done through them.
Okay, but none of that was done in this case, right?
Correct, it was not needed in this case.
Okay, so was there any treatment that Jamison Timms needed after he was at Children's Hospital of Atlanta?
From a fracture standpoint, no. No.
Okay. From any standpoint?
Basically, what was needed at that time was evaluation to see if he had any sort of bleeding abnormalities or bony abnormalities like we talked about earlier. That was the main thing. And to look about his health and to see what injuries were there.
Okay. And I just want to be very clear, because, well, actually, we can go into this later on in the record. Let's get through the record. So, okay, so page 53, no additional interventions ordered by you, by neurosurgery, by orthopedics whatsoever for Jamison Timms.
That's correct. You said page 53?
Yes.
That's correct.
All right, and on page 55, we've got a note about an RN contacting an MD requesting Tylenol, and this is January 15th at 1:15 in the morning.
Yes.
And so this is about roughly 10 hours after his parents have been escorted out of the hospital.
I'm not sure about that timing, but I'll take your word for it.
Okay, and so this is the first time that pain medication is being requested for agitation in the child?
I have not reviewed the nursing notes for those details, but I'll take your word for it.
Okay. All right, on page 60, on the middle of the page, high-risk screen, Friday, January 14th, 2022. High-risk indicators, abuse, assault. And that's placed into the record on January 14th at 10:40 a.m. Would you agree?
Yes.
Did you have anything to do with having that placed into the record?
No.
All right. Moving down to page 77, referral data for Saturday, January 15th, 2022. And this references a social worker, Haley Thomas, and an RN, Dylan, presumably Dylan Scher, who we've heard about previously. And the referral reason is discharge planning for Jamison. Were you involved in any of this conversation regarding discharge planning for Jamison?
If I am not listed there, likely not. This would have been likely through the social worker and potentially DFACS, but I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, moving on to page 83. we've got a discharge diagnosis and a discharge date of January 15th, 2022.
So page 83?
Yes, page 83.
Okay. And
Okay.
repeat that again, I'm sorry?
So we've got a discharge date of January 15th, 2022, and a discharge diagnosis, right?
Yes.
And this includes closed fracture of multiple ribs of left side with routine healing,
Yes.
abnormal bruising, non-accidental traumatic injury to child. Were you involved in this discharge diagnosis?
I would have agreed with this discharge diagnosis, but I did not enter this particular entry. This was entered by Dr. John Eanes.
Did Dr. Eanes personally care for Jameson?
It would seem like he did at discharge, since he authored the note.
Okay. Was he participating in any of the conference calls regarding treatment and care for Jameson that you had previously testified to?
The conference call that I was on was Dr. Fleming.
Okay. All right. So moving over to page 84. Under hospital course, it says child advocacy evaluated the baby and multiple labs were ordered. DFACS took custody and the parents were removed from the hospital. Would you agree that's what it states under hospital course?
Sorry, I'm taking a moment to find it and read it.
It's towards the bottom.
Yes.
Okay. So were you involved in that decision for DFACS to take custody and the parents to be removed from the hospital?
As I previously testified to, no.
No. Okay. All right, moving on to page 86. We've got some test results that were already back on January 14th of 2022 at 4:20 p.m., right?
Yes.
Okay. And under the lipase results, we've got a value that's significantly lower than the reference range. Would you agree?
Yes.
We've got a reference range of what it's supposed to be is 73 to 393. And the value that was tested in Jameson-Timms was 27.
Yes.
Okay, so you would agree that Jameson-Timms, as of January 14th, had low test results on lipase?
That's right.
Okay. And if you move over to the next page, 87, continuing on the results, the von Willebrand profile, which we've already talked about a little bit previously, but would you agree that the factor VIII assay has a value that is outside the reference range and would be considered abnormal?
Yes, except that factor VIII, and I believe that I testified to this prior, is a acute phase reactant. So when it's high, it is not worrisome, and that's what his is 138.
Okay.
And the higher value is 125, so that is not concerning.
Okay. And then moving down, we've got fibrinogen activity. I may not be pronouncing that right. What is fibrinogen?
It's part of your clotting network.
Okay. So, and the reference range is 200 to 400 milligrams per deciliter, right?
That's right.
Okay, and Jameson's value was 204, right?
That's right.
So right at the very, very bottom of that range.
It's still in the normal range.
Okay, so did that give you any concern or flagging at all?
No, because it's still in the normal range.
Okay, move on to page 88. You would agree, actually, we can talk about that later in the record. Pending results at discharge. Attempted to obtain a reptilase and thrombin time, but 2 samples both clotted prior to arrival in lab. Would you agree that's what that says?
Yes.
Okay. And does that give you any concern if a sample clots prior to arriving at the lab for testing?
Actually, it's reassuring because if you're looking for a bleeding disorder, that a sample clotting means that the child's blood is able to clot, and that would be the opposite of a bleeding disorder.
Okay, so when were you able to get the testing for the reptilase and thrombin done?
We didn't repeat that. It's something that is actually not that necessary to do, and again, the fact that they clotted would mean that he doesn't have a bleeding problem.
Okay, so that would be, when it says in discussion with Child Advocacy Center, this is not required for discharge, you would have been involved in the decision-making process on not attempting a valid test of the reptilase and thrombin.
That's right. Nursing would have called me to say, is this something that we must absolutely have to have before he was sent out? And that's not something we absolutely had to have.
Okay. If we can move down to page 95, please. And this is dated January 13th, 2022 at 7:48 PM, right?
Yes.
Okay. And this is when Dr. Fleming discussed the plan of care with his parents at the bedside. They expressed understanding and gratitude, right?
95, page 95 at the bottom. I'm not seeing where you say about the parents understanding and
It's number 6 on the, under the plan.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Okay, and so the parents expressed understanding and gratitude?
Yes.
Okay. And then, under the ED notes that are from January 13th at 4:20 PM, your name is mentioned there, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Dr. Verena Brown, Stephanie Blank Center. Can you tell me what your involvement was in this notation being placed into the record?
Yes, as we had mentioned the transfer center before. So when Dr. Garcia called me, because we knew that the child was going to be going to our emergency department, and we actually recommended that he go to our emergency department instead of our clinic because of the testing that he was going to need to be done. It is our protocol to call the transfer center. The transfer center alerts the physicians of where the child is going to go so that they're going to be ready and available to see the child at that time. So that's what this notation would be.
Okay. And so that was conversations that you were having on January 13th with, okay,
That's right.
excellent. All right, so page 99. In the middle of that, we've got a 6:47 PM on January 13th that says CBC, CMP, lipase, all normal.
Page 99. Okay, where do you see that?
It's kind of in the middle of the page, the first line under medical decision-making.
Yes, I see that.
Okay, but you would agree that actually the lipase results that were received back on Jamison Timms were not normal and were in the abnormal range?
So this is Dr. Malnikoff's note, but again, I think we mentioned previously back on Cross last time that a low lipase is really not that exciting. It doesn't really mean anything. It's typically how the test is run. So the fact that he mentioned that lipase was normal probably meant because it's insignificant.
Okay, so wouldn't it have been better to accurately reflect that lipase was low rather than saying that lipase was normal and then coming to court later and saying, oh, it's not a big deal?
Well, this is not my note. It's Dr. Malnikoff's note, so you'd have to ask him.
Okay. All right, so let's move over to page 100. So this is a consult note by Brown, Verena W., MD, at January 14th, 7:28 PM, right?
Yes.
Okay. So at this point, Jamison's parents have already been removed from the hospital, right? As of 7:28 PM on January 14th, 2022?
Yes.
And so this says, I was asked by the SERPAC team, and what's the SERPAC team?
That's the hospital's team I was mentioning.
Okay. To consult on Jamison Timms, a 3-month-old male who presented with a significant abrasion to the face, an injury to the mouth, multiple healing rib fractures, and a vertebral fracture. That's what you put in your consult notes, right?
That's right.
I have had the opportunity to review the medical record, review the radiographic images, obtain history from parents, and examine Jamison. At this time, his injuries are most consistent with non-accidental trauma, right?
That's right.
Okay. Is this your first consult note that you have produced in this form in Jamison's record?
This is my preliminary note, yes.
Okay, so this is the preliminary note. Okay. And it says, under the plan, I have ordered OI testing, bone health labs, and bleeding disorder screening labs, right?
That's right.
And number 6, we recommend that Jamison stay in a safe environment pending further investigation.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Now, you've got another consult note that kind of continues through page 101, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you noted in here that when the original skeletal survey at Erlanger was reviewed, that there was a mild periosteal reaction in the proximal left tibia?
Yes.
Okay, and you cannot rule out a fracture there.
The radiologist there, I believe, could not rule out a fracture there.
Okay.
It was ruled out later, but at the time, that's the information that we had.
Okay. All right. And then on page 106, we've got further consults from you. And at the top of the page, under impression, loss of height of the vertebral body of T10 suggesting a compression fracture, right?
This is directly from the skeletal survey by the radiologist, but yes, that's what it says.
Okay. It doesn't say he has a compression fracture. It says he has a loss of vertebral height, right?
Yes, but that compression fracture was later confirmed
By whom?
by Dr. Dixon.
Okay. When did she confirm that?
So that's one of the reasons we do follow-up skeletal surveys. We notice the healing there.
When did Dr. Dixon confirm that it was a compression fracture and not a loss of vertebral height?
So on follow-up skeletal survey, you can see that the height comes back up, which suggests that the fracture has healed. Then at that point, you know for confirmation, if there was ever any doubt, which I believe that there, at this point, she was saying that it was suggestive, but she was seeing that loss of height. But that widening and healing of the height shows that it had healed back up again. So that would have been that follow-up skeletal survey. I believe was in June. There was one in between as well, later on in March.
There's the February 3rd.
February 3rd, thank you.
Okay. Did you find anything else about when Dr. Dixon may have confirmed this, or?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I answered the question.
Let's move over to page 109, which is continuing your consult notes on January 14th that were entered at 7:33 PM. And this is where you said Jameson was approximately 6 months old at the time of presentation. I assume that's a typo.
6 weeks is a typo, yes.
Okay. Okay. And you're saying at this point, his injuries at 6 weeks of age appear to be most consistent with non-accidental trauma.
Yes, I was just talking about the review of the bruises at Erlanger.
Okay. And then you said Jameson now has multiple other injuries.
Yes.
Okay. Did any of these injuries require any treatment whatsoever?
No.
Is this normal in child abuse cases?
Yes.
Okay, so it's normal that you would diagnose a child with multiple injuries, but none of them require any treatment whatsoever?
Oftentimes, we don't necessarily have treatments, especially with rib fractures, because there's no way to cast them. In different kinds of injuries like bruises, they heal on their own. So a lot of times we see children that are injured and they don't necessarily need any kind of treatment.
Okay. All right, and then if we can go to page 118, we've got another reference to the parents already being aware, but I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that you did not have anything to do with that notation in the record.
Not this notation in the record. Let me make sure that before I speak, that that's true. No.
Okay. And then under interdisciplinary progress notes, continued.
Is
We've
that
got,
still under page 118?
I'm sorry, if we could move over to page 119.
Okay.
It starts as the assessment narrative on page 118 and then moves on to page 119. And let's see. It says DFACS made contact with family last night and assessed the child without concerns. Did you see this in the course of reviewing Jameson Tim's case? It looks like it was entered at January 13th at 9:32 PM, so prior to you meeting with Jameson.
I would likely have seen this on the 14th.
Okay, so you would have seen this on the 14th, where it said DFACS made contact with family last night and assessed the child without concerns.
Yes.
And then the next sentence is, at some point, the pediatrician is said to have coordinated with someone, quote, high up in DFACS administration who pushed the issue. Would you agree that's what is stated in the record?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know who this person high up in DFACS administration was?
I do not.
Okay. Did it give you any concern to see that DFACS had assessed the child without concern and then someone had placed into the medical record someone high up at DFACS pushed the case?
I think that whenever you see kids with oral injuries like Dr. Harbin saw, she probably was very concerned. So I'm assuming that that's why she probably talked to somebody higher up.
Okay. So your assessment based on your training and experience is that sentence about the pediatrician is said to have coordinated with someone high up in DFACS administration is that Dr. Harbin Pickett spoke specifically to someone at DFACS about this case to push the issue.
I'm not sure.
Your Honor, she doesn't know.
If-
She doesn't know. She doesn't need to guess at what somebody else did or didn't do.
I'll sustain that
I
objection.
would agree. Absolutely. Yeah. Please only testify if you have personal knowledge of it. If you're not aware.
No. I will say this, just for clarity. So when Dr. when Dr. Garcia called me, I called the transfer center. Dr. Garcia had initially wanted Jameson to come to clinic, but because of the injury, I recommended him come to the ED. I talked to our DFACS liaison to let DFACS know that instead of clinic, he should come to the ED. So I'm not sure if they're actually talking about me or Dr. Harbin in this, to be honest. Just for clarity.
Okay.
So, but I did make that recommendation, not clinic, with the ED.
Okay, so it was your recommendation that he come down to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta rather than going back to the clinic?
Dr. Garcia wanted us to see him in clinic. And I recommended, because he needed a CT scan and skeletal survey, for him to come to the ED. So I reached out for our DFACS liaison to let the county know that not clinic, but ED.
Okay.
So I did let DFACS in a way know. And then our DFACS liaison gave me the name of someone to email. So that could have been the person high up, and I said, he
Who
needs to
was that
come to-
person?
I don't remember that person's name. I would have to go through my email and find it. But I did say, he needs to come to not our clinic, but come to our ED. So they might be talking about me in this.
Okay. And so, and you did email someone at DFACS about this?
Yeah, to come to our ED and not our clinic.
And you would have done this on January 13th,
I would have done this on January 13th.
prior to ever meeting Jameson and his family or conducting an intake and observation of him?
Right, just because based on what Dr. Garcia had said, per protocol, he needs a skeletal survey and a head CT, and we can't do that in clinic. We have to do that through the emergency department.
Okay.
It's just not, those services are not available outpatient.
Okay, so when you say clinic, is that a clinic at CHOA? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, so
It's an outpatient
the
clinic.
recommendation was come to CHOA regardless. The question was, does he come to the ED?
Emergency department or.
Emergency department or
Yeah.
the clinic?
Right.
And you were the one who said, we gotta bring him to the emergency
Yeah, because
department?
we can't do CT and skeletal outpatient.
Okay. All right, let's move on to page 138, under the social work section. And again, if this is not something you're familiar with, that's fine. But on January 14th at 2022, would you agree that the learning progress summary for mother and father appears ready for discharge with the child?
The foster mother at bedside, is that where you're looking at?
No, that's, this is at the bottom of the page, under mother and father. Would you agree that the record says that they are designated appears ready for discharge?
Oh, yes, I see that.
As of January 14th at 10:47 a.m.?
Yes, I see that.
Okay. Well, did you have anything to do with this notation or the determination that the mother and father appeared ready to care for Jameson if he was discharged into their care?
No, I didn't.
All right. Now, if we can move to page 145. Would you agree that in the middle of the page, under social work consult, January 13th, there is an order comment, suspected non-accidental trauma will need a safety plan from Gordon County DFACS?
Yes, I see that.
Okay. Did you have anything to do with that notation in the record?
Not a notation. I mean, I did say in my note that we recommend that he stay in a safe environment, but as I have testified to before, the safe environment is totally up to DFACS, what they want to do with that.
Okay, and if we can move over to the next page, 146. And this is listing all of the orders that have been done on Jameson's case, right? It says at the top, all
Yes,
orders?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and so at the top, we've got outside study radiograph, reading x-rays, right?
Yes.
Okay. And there's a questionnaire, reason for study OSH. What does that indicate to you?
Outside hospital.
Okay. Do you want, there's then the question, do you want a second interpretation by a children's radiologist? And the answer is no?
Seems so.
Okay, were you the one who said, no, we don't want a second opinion on these radiographs?
No.
Who would have been responsible for making that decision, no, we don't want a second opinion on these radiographs?
I don't know.
Okay, so it says under order comments, supervising provider. Would that have maybe been Dr. Fleming, or could it possibly have been you?
Definitely not me. Yeah, I'm not sure. It depends if they actually had the discs of the radiographs, and also because we were getting our own, but I'm not sure.
Okay. And then moving on to page 154, we're only a few stickers left here. And these are the results from the CT head scan, right?
Yes.
Okay. And was there any hemorrhage or mass effect or any irregularities suggesting trauma inflicted upon Jamison Thames in his head CT scan?
No, his head CT was normal.
All right. And then just on page 174, this is you authorizing an additional skeletal survey, or is this you completing your review of the skeletal survey from January 13th?
This is me authorizing an order for another skeletal survey.
Okay. All right, and then page 193, we've got some progress notes from a Dr. Stephen Messner.
You said 173?
193.
193. Yes.
And so this says per Dr. Brown's consult note and just repeats the consult note that we've already gone over and seen other places in the record, right?
That's right.
And this was the consult note that you produced on January 14th at 7 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay. And it includes the words, in conclusion, Jamison's constellation of findings are consistent with child physical abuse.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the note that I signed on the 18th, yes.
And then on page 200, we've got additional, the progress notes are continued from the February 3rd visit to CHOA with Dr. Messner. And did you have anything to do with the impression produced here, or is that all Dr. Messner's work?
I mean, certainly he would have read my note and looked at that visit and that hospitalization, but this is his work.
Okay, because he references Dr. Brown's review of those photos indicate that they were also indicative.
Correct.
Okay, and so when he mentions that it's the T11 vertebral body, that's his typographical error or confusion from the scan?
That is his typo.
Okay,
He actually mentioned T4 previously, so that is a typo.
okay.
Or
All right,
T10.
and then page 202, I think this is our last one from the record. We've got a social work note, and it also references your evaluation that was conducted at the Stephanie Blank Center for Safe and Healthy Children, right?
Right, this is from his outpatient follow-up visit on February the 3rd.
Okay. And so it references you as the person responsible for the initial conclusions and review of Jamison's records.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else in the medical record from CHOA that I have not gone over that you think is relevant to your treatment of Jamison Thames?
I don't think so.
Okay. Now, you mentioned, so you are a practicing physician here in Georgia, right?
Yes.
You mentioned you had previously been a physician in Tennessee, correct?
Correct.
Have you previously been a physician in any other states?
Virginia.
Okay. Are you any longer a physician in Tennessee or Virginia?
No.
What were the circumstances of you ceasing to be a licensed physician in Tennessee and Virginia?
So in Virginia, I finished my fellowship and then moved to Tennessee.
Okay, and so what were the circumstances of your leaving Tennessee and no longer being licensed to practice medicine there?
I got a job at CHOA to be closer to home.
Okay. But you did not retain your medical certification for Tennessee?
No.
Even though there is a large children's hospital in Tennessee that you have been working with on this very case?
No, medical licenses are expensive.
Okay. Have you ever been sued for providing false testimony or false allegations?
I have been sued, yes,
Okay, how many times?
once.
Okay. And you do a lot of work with prosecutors around the state, is that fair to say?
Yes,
Okay. Does that include coming up with programming for the prosecutors' conferences on child abuse cases?
yes. I do a lot of different lectures for a lot of different people.
Okay, can you tell me about the presentations that you have made to the prosecutors?
Yeah, so I do presentations for lots of people, residents, medical students, different conferences. I have spoken at the Crimes Against Children Conference in Dallas, which is prosecutors, investigators. I think there are defense attorneys that go to that too. It's a huge conference. I went there in 2019 and spoke. I did a co-presentation with a prosecutor here from Georgia.
Okay. And you also do a lot of work with Department of Family and Children Services, right?
I do.
Okay. So this person that you emailed regarding Jamison Tim's case, was this a person that you had emailed about other cases?
So the liaison I got in touch with, yes, the person that she gave me the name for, I don't think I knew that person previously, but again, I'm not sure.
Okay. All right. And is it your belief that an X-ray, a radiograph, is able to provide adequate evidence of bone density issues?
For the most part, yes, I believe so.
Okay, why do you say for the most part?
Well, I think that it can give you a whole heck of a lot of information on the gross wellness of bones. When you have osteopenia, you can see that the bones look weak, the bones look ghostly, the bones look very thin. And when the bones are healthy, you can see that on X-ray as well.
Okay. Well, you can see mineral density on the X-ray scans, is that right?
Yeah.
Can you see collagen density and collagen fibers on X-rays?
No, it won't pick up that.
And would you agree that collagen fibers in bones make a big difference as to their brittleness?
Of course.
Okay. And that's not visible on an X-ray?
No.
All right. What was the variant of unknown significance on Jamison's call 1A2?
I would have to look up the number if you'd like me to
Okay.
tell you exactly what it is. But I don't think I saw the genetics report in here.
I don't think it was produced by CHOA until after the February date, and I think this goes through February. So do you recall what that genetic variation was? I think you had told Mr. Hood that there was absolutely no chance that it would ever be determined to be
It's a number,
pathogenic.
it's like 151 point something, but I don't want to say exactly the wrong number.
Okay.
So I would have to look at the exact number on the report.
Okay. All right. And you, I believe you previously testified that Jamison was a healthy, normal-looking baby. when you
Yes.
saw him, on the
Yes.
one occasion that you saw him?
Well, I saw him on 2 occasions, remember,
When was the second occasion?
in June of 2020.
That's right, all the way in June. So the
Yeah.
one time that you saw him in the January visit to CHOA, he appeared to be a healthy, normal-looking baby with attentive and engaged caregivers at his bedside.
At both times, he was very well and healthy looking, yes.
Okay. I don't believe I have any additional questions at this time. Thank you for your time, Doctor.
Ms. Fox, any other questions?
do, just a couple, Your Honor.
Dr. Brown, you were asked whether or not you had been sued for providing false testimony. You said you had been sued. Was it for providing false testimony?
It was for providing a misdiagnosis on abusive head trauma case, and that case was dropped. That was in Kentucky.
So the case itself was dropped?
It was, and then they tried to reappeal on the Superior Court of Kentucky, and it was dropped again.
Okay. And that's the only time you've been sued?
That's correct.
Would you characterize your testimony as false?
No.
Okay, you had a number of parts of the record that you were handed that the defense wanted to bring to the jury's attention. I want to call your attention to page 5. It's a list of the medications that Jameson received when he was at CHOA. It's at the bottom third of the page. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what different types of medication he was actually given?
Tylenol, ibuprofen, which is Motrin, and like a mineral petroleum, which is just a topical ointment.
Okay,
Space.
so if we were breaking it down, are the Tylenol and the Motrin for pain?
Yes.
Would the mineral oil be a treatment for maybe the injury on the face?
Yes.
Would there have been any treatment for the tear near the frenulum?
No.
You were asked about Dr. Dixon's final analysis. Can I call your attention to page 184 to the survey that she read from February the 3rd?
Okay.
If you will read the compression that's going to be under the spine, what specifically did Dr. Dixon write?
Compression fracture of T10, again noted.
Did she write suggested or it might be?
No,
It said compression fracture of T10, again noted.
that's correct.
Okay. Is there any such thing as having temporary brittle bones?
No.
Why not?
So that is a,
I would propose objection at this point. I think this is beyond the realm of her expertise. She's not an orthopedist.
Ms. Fox?
Your Honor, I totally disagree. She is the child abuse specialist. It's her job to identify different syndromes it could be and eliminate them to come up with the finding of child abuse.
Well, I think the issue is her expertise in the area of brittle bones, not.
I asked
so I'll
whether or
let you-
not it was
I'll let you ask her if she has any training or expertise concerning brittle bones.
Do you have any training or expertise in the area of brittle bones?
I have training, yes.
Do you also have training and expertise as to whether or not a temporary brittle bone condition exists?
I have a training in that.
Is that medically accepted in the community?
It is not medically accepted in the community, no.
What is that response?
It is not.
Or is not?
It is not. It is
Okay.
not.
Well, I'm not going to allow you to ask her the question.
Lastly, after examining Jameson, receiving all the test results that were ordered at CHOA, considering only his condition at CHOA, that is the 3 broken ribs, the compression injury, the mark on his face, and the tear under his tongue, and not considering anything that may or may not have occurred up at Erlanger, do you have an opinion as to whether or not his injuries at CHOA are consistent or inconsistent with child abuse?
Yes, it's consistent with child abuse.
Why?
Jameson was not of the age where he could have done these injuries to himself. After thorough evaluation of bone diseases and bleeding disorders, he did not have any bone diseases. He did not have osteogenesis imperfecta. He did not have any Ehlers-Danlos. He did not have any sort of brittle bones. His vitamin D was 32, which is normal. He did not have any injuries from birth. He does not have temporary brittle bone disease. He does not have any of these other illnesses. He is a healthy boy. When we saw him in February, he was a healthy boy. When we saw him at 8 months, when he was pulling up to a stand and a lot more mobile, he had not fractured again. He had not had any substantial bruises. He was a healthy boy.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Hood, any additional questions?
Briefly, Judge. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
So going back to one of Ms. Bernard's line of questioning to you, I don't know that I fully understood your answer. She asked you if Jameson was in relation to the alleged compression fracture at T10, if there was a review or a consult done with an orthopedist. And you made some reference to the fact that he was seen and this was spoken about in the emergency department. So did an orthopedist or an orthopedic surgeon consult with y'all and make a determination about this T10 supposed fracture?
He did not consult with me. It seems like the images were reviewed in the emergency department, and since he seemed stable, there's nothing to stabilize a T10.
Okay. All right. And there was no follow-up MRI that was ordered by you or any other physician to your knowledge regarding that injury, is that correct?
That's correct, and you don't necessarily need to have an MRI when you know you're going to have follow-up skeletal surveys, because you should be able to, again, to see healing of that compression fracture when the compression fracture lifts up in height once again, which is what we saw.
Okay. So your testimony is that y'all were convinced that there was a fracture of every thoracic vertebrae of this child, and you did not order a follow-up MRI to see if anything was possibly impinging upon this child's spinal cord?
Right. You look at the clinical manifestations, right? When something is impinging in the spinal cord, you would see that in the exam of the child. You would see that neurologically.
Okay. Well, this is a child who y'all said had a compression fracture, who's being handled by nurses, correct?
Correct.
Handled potentially by parents, handled by social workers, right?
That's right.
Being passed around. And y'all's position was he had a compression fracture of a vertebral body, and you did no follow-up imaging to see the status of that?
Well, we did. We did skeletal surveys.
What would offer you a more detailed imaging of this supposed vertebral fracture? A skeletal survey or an MRI of the thoracic spine?
You can certainly do MRIs of the thoracic spine, but it wouldn't really change anything, because you would still be able to see clinically whether the child has any symptoms from his compression fracture, which he didn't.
Well, what if the MRI showed you that there was a chip or there was a possible impingement of this child's spinal cord? Y'all didn't want to know that while you're passing this child around to be handled by nurses and social workers? Are you being serious, doctor?
You would still be able to see it clinically, and you watch him clinically, because there would be no intervention that you would do at that time. You would still watch the child clinically. But these questions are actually better if you have subpoenaed like a neurosurgeon. They would be the person that would be asking these questions
You were
to.
one of the physicians in charge of this child's care, were you not?
Correct, but this is more of a neurosurgery kind of question.
Well, let me ask it this way. Did you consult with a neurosurgeon about that issue?
No, I didn't.
Or an orthopedist?
No, I didn't.
Y'all were perfectly happy. You're so convinced that this child had a compression fracture at T10 that you're allowing this child to be passed around by people at a hospital and risking him becoming a paraplegic. And you made no consultation with an orthopedist or anybody in neuro. Is that correct?
That's correct. He was clinically well. He remained clinically well, and he remained clinically well when we saw him in clinic multiple times, including at 8 months when he was pulling to a stand. But you can certainly subpoena a neurosurgeon to ask those questions.
Well, I can, but I'm asking you,
I know,
right?
and
These
I've
are-
answered.
These are questions that you could have asked, right?
That's right, but we answer those questions even at 8 months.
And you chose not to.
We answer those questions at 8 months.
All right. Thank you, doctor.
You're welcome.
Ms. Bernard, any other questions?
A single one. Is your testimony
That when you observed and treated Jamison Timms, that he was clinically well?
He was clinically well, yes.
No further questions, thank you.
Anything else, Ms. Fox?
No, ma'am, she be excused.
Anything else, Mr. Hood?
No, Judge.
Anything else, Ms.
I
Bernard?
would ask that she remain on call, Your Honor, as we see which other witnesses the state chooses to bring before the jury.
Then I would excuse the witness for today. She can return to work. She would not be excused from her subpoena, however, and would be subject to recall. So with those instructions, Dr. Brown, you're free to go today. It's now about 20 minutes till 11. We're going to take our morning break. If the ladies and gentlemen of the jury will just leave their notepads there, and you can go for your morning break. We'll take a 15-minute break. Everyone else remain in the courtroom. Everyone else remain in the courtroom.